The coffee mug slipped from my fingers the moment Sophie said the words that would change everything. Not dropped, slipped. Like my entire world had suddenly become too slippery to hold on to. I'm pregnant, Jake. It's not yours. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I watched the ceramic shatter against our kitchen floor. The same floor I'd installed myself 3 years ago when we bought this Victorian house in Millbrook. The same floor where we danced barefoot to old Springsteen songs during our housewarming party. The same floor that was now covered in coffee and broken pieces of what used to be my favorite mug, the one that said, "World's okayest husband." Turned out it was prophetic. Say that again? I managed, though my voice sounded like it was coming from someone else entirely. Sophie stood in our doorway, still wearing her yoga pants and that oversized sweater she'd bought for her spiritual retreat in Costa Rica. Her blonde hair was pulled back in one of those messy buns that somehow cost $40 at her salon to achieve. She looked nervous, but there was something else in her expression. Determination, like she'd rehearsed this moment. I met someone on the retreat. We connected on a deeper level than you and I ever have. She stepped carefully around the broken mug, her designer sneakers crunching on ceramic. I'm keeping the baby, and you're going to help me raise it. I laughed, actually laughed. It started as a chuckle and built into something that probably sounded unhinged. Let me get this straight. You went on a 2-week find-yourself vacation to Costa Rica, found yourself in bed with some other guy, got pregnant, and now you want me to play daddy. It's not like that. Then what's it like, Sophie? I leaned against the kitchen counter, my hands gripping the granite so hard my knuckles went white. Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like that. She had the audacity to look hurt. You don't understand. Marcus and I... Marcus? The name tasted bitter. You're on a first-name basis with your baby daddy. How modern of you. Don't be crude, Jake. This is bigger than your wounded ego. She crossed her arms, and I recognized the stance. It was her negotiation pose, the one she used when dealing with difficult clients at her yoga studio. Here's what's going to happen. You can accept this situation and we'll raise the child together as a family, or we can get divorced and you can give me half of everything you own. Your choice. The kitchen went quiet except for the hum of our refrigerator and the distant sound of our neighbor's dog barking. I stared at my wife of 7 years, really looked at her, and realized I was seeing a stranger. Those are my only options? I asked quietly. Those are your only options. I pushed off from the counter and walked to the window that overlooked our backyard. The garden Sophie had begged me to plant last spring was dying. We'd both been too busy to maintain it, apparently, or maybe just too busy growing apart. You know what's funny? I said, still looking outside. Last month when you said you needed space to reconnect with your authentic self, I actually felt guilty. I thought maybe I hadn't been paying enough attention to you. Maybe I'd been working too much, spending too many nights at the construction sites. Jake, I'm not finished. I turned around, and something in my voice made her step back. I blamed myself for whatever was missing in our marriage. I even looked into couples therapy, made a list of things I could do better. Sophie's face softened slightly. That's sweet, but you were already screwing Marcus in Costa Rica while I was here feeling guilty about not being a good enough husband. The softness vanished. You're being dramatic. Dramatic? I walked over to where she stood, stopping just close enough that she had to look up at me. Sophie, you just told me I can either raise another man's child or lose half of everything I've worked for. If that's not dramatic, I don't know what is. It doesn't have to be ugly, Jake. We can make this work. For who? You? Marcus? Because it sure as hell doesn't work for me. She sighed like I was being unreasonable, like I was the problem in this equation. Fine. If you want to be selfish about this, we can do it the hard way. My lawyer says I'm entitled to half of your business, half the house, half of everything, including your precious construction company. Your lawyer? The words hit me like a slap. You've already talked to a lawyer? I had to protect myself. Protect yourself from what? The consequences of your own actions? Sophie's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and actually smiled. A small, secret smile that made my stomach turn. That's him, isn't it? I asked. That's Marcus. She didn't deny it. Instead, she typed a quick response, her fingers moving with the kind of familiarity that comes from constant communication. Unbelievable. I shook my head. You're texting your boyfriend while giving me an ultimatum about raising his kid. He's not my boyfriend. It's complicated. Complicated. I repeated the word slowly. You know what's not complicated, Sophie? This conversation. You've made your position clear. Raise your affair baby or lose everything I've built. Our baby, our everything. No. The word came out harder than I intended. It's not our baby. It's your baby and Marcus's baby, and it's not our everything. It's my business that I built from nothing, my house that I renovated with my own hands, my money that I earned working 60-hour weeks while you found yourself at yoga retreats. Sophie's mask finally slipped, and I saw something cold underneath. Half of everything, Jake. That's what I'll get in a divorce. Maybe I'll even get more, considering how hostile you're being. You think you have me cornered. I know I do. I walked to the kitchen island where my laptop sat closed. Sophie watched me nervously as I opened it and began typing. What are you doing? Exploring option 3. There is no option 3. I just gave you the only 2 choices you have. I looked up from the screen, and for the first time since she'd walked into the kitchen, I smiled. Sophie, you've been underestimating me for years. That's about to become a very expensive mistake. You can't scare me with empty threats. Who said anything about threats? I closed the laptop and stood up. I'm just getting started on option 3. You'll see what that looks like soon enough. Sophie stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying to figure out if I was bluffing. The truth was, I wasn't entirely sure myself, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I wasn't going to raise Marcus's baby, and I wasn't going to hand over half of everything I'd worked for just because my wife decided to have an affair. You're making a mistake, Jake. The only mistake I made was trusting you. I headed toward the kitchen door, crunching broken ceramic under my work boots. I'll be staying at my sister's tonight. We'll talk again when you're ready to have a real conversation. This was a real conversation. I paused in the doorway and looked back at her. She was standing in the middle of our kitchen, surrounded by the mess we'd made, literally and figuratively. Her phone was buzzing again. No, Sophie, that was you delivering an ultimatum. When you're ready to actually talk about divorce terms, custody arrangements for a child that isn't mine, and how we're going to split our assets fairly, then we'll have a real conversation. Until then, enjoy your texts with Marcus. I walked out of the kitchen, grabbed my keys from the hall table, and headed for the front door. Behind me, I could hear Sophie starting to cry. A month ago, that sound would have stopped me in my tracks, would have made me turn around and try to fix whatever was wrong. Today, it just sounded like the noise someone makes when they realize their bluff has been called. I climbed into my truck and sat there for a moment, staring at the house I'd put so much work into. The wraparound porch I'd rebuilt, the windows I'd restored, the garden that was dying in the backyard. My phone rang. It was my sister Gina. Hey stranger, haven't heard from you in weeks. How's married life treating you? I started the engine and pulled out of the driveway. Actually, Gina, I was hoping I could crash on your couch tonight. Sophie and I are having some problems. Of course. What kind of problems? The usual married couple stuff? I turned onto Maple Street, watching my house disappear in the rearview mirror. The kind where your wife comes home pregnant with another man's baby and thinks you should be grateful for the opportunity to raise it. Silence on the other end of the line. Gina? You still there? I'm here. I'm just trying to process what you just said. Her voice had shifted into what I thought of as her professional tone. Gina worked as an administrative assistant at the county courthouse, and she'd seen enough domestic drama to know when something was serious. Jake, please tell me you're not doing anything stupid. Define stupid. Anything that involves violence, property damage, or decisions you'll regret when you're thinking clearly. I stopped at a red light and watched a couple walking their dog on the sidewalk. They were holding hands, laughing about something. They looked happy. I wondered if Sophie and I had ever looked that happy, or if we'd just been good at pretending. I'm not going to hurt anyone, Gina, but I'm also not going to roll over and let Sophie steamroll me because she thinks I don't have any other options. What other options do you have? The light turned green. I pressed the gas and headed toward Gina's apartment across town. I'm working on that. But first, I need to ask you something. In your experience at the courthouse, what happens when someone tries to commit paternity fraud? Paternity fraud? Jake, what exactly did Sophie say to you? I told her everything. The ultimatum. The lawyer Sophie had already consulted. The way she'd smiled while texting Marcus during our conversation. By the time I finished, I was pulling into Gina's parking lot. Jesus Christ, Jake. She really said you had to raise this guy's baby or lose everything? Those were her exact words. And she's already talked to a lawyer? Apparently. Gina was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was carefully neutral. You know I can't give you legal advice, but I can tell you that the courts don't look kindly on people who try to manipulate the system. Or their spouses. That's what I was hoping you'd say. Jake, be careful. I know you're angry and you have every right to be, but don't let that anger make you do something that'll hurt you in the long run. I turned off the engine and sat in the parking lot, looking up at Gina's second-floor apartment. The lights were on, and I could see her moving around inside, probably clearing space on her couch for her suddenly homeless brother. I'm not angry, Gina. I'm focused. There's a difference. If you say so, come on up. We'll order pizza and you can tell me more about option 3. I grabbed my overnight bag from the passenger seat and headed upstairs. For the first time since Sophie had dropped her bombshell, I felt like I could think clearly. She'd made her choice when she decided to sleep with Marcus. She'd made another choice when she decided to try to manipulate me into accepting the consequences of her actions. Now it was time for me to make some choices of my own. Gina's couch was about as comfortable as sleeping on a pile of bricks, but I'd barely slept anyway. I spent most of the night staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything Sophie had said and everything she hadn't said. By the time dawn broke through Gina's living room windows, I had the beginnings of a plan. The first step was coffee. The second step was calling in sick to work. The third step was figuring out exactly what I was dealing with. You look terrible, Gina said, padding into the living room in her bathrobe and fuzzy slippers. She worked the early shift at the courthouse, which meant she was usually up by 6. Thanks. That's exactly what every man wants to hear after his wife tells him he's going to be raising another man's baby. Too soon for jokes? Way too soon. I sat up and folded the blanket she'd given me. But I appreciate the honesty. Gina headed to the kitchen, and I heard the blessed sound of her coffee maker starting up. She had one of those expensive machines that Sophie had always wanted, but I'd never been willing to spend the money on. Funny how priorities change when your marriage explodes overnight. So what's the plan? Gina called from the kitchen. Information gathering. I need to know exactly what Sophie's been up to, who this Marcus guy is, and what kind of legal ground I'm standing on. And how do you plan to do that? I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. I'm going to start by calling someone who knows Sophie better than I apparently do. The phone rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. Jake? Is everything okay? It's pretty early. Hey, Marty. Sorry to bother you, but I need to ask you something. Has Sophie been at the bar recently? Maybe with someone I don't know? Marty Kowalski owned the Hammered Nail, the local dive bar where I'd been going for drinks since I moved to Millbrook. He was also one of the few people in town who seemed to hear everything that happened before it officially happened. Sophie? At my place? Marty sounded genuinely confused. Jake, your wife hasn't set foot in my bar since your birthday 2 years ago, and she spent that entire night complaining about the music being too loud. What about before she left for Costa Rica? Any unusual behavior? Different crowd of friends? There was a pause. Jake, what's going on? You sound weird. I walked to Gina's window and looked out at the parking lot. A few early commuters were scraping frost off their windshields. Normal people starting normal days, probably not dealing with cheating wives and paternity ultimatums. Sophie came home pregnant yesterday. The baby isn't mine. Holy shit. Marty's voice dropped to what he probably thought was a whisper, but was actually just regular volume. Subtlety had never been his strong suit. Are you sure? She told me herself. Apparently she met someone at her retreat in Costa Rica. That spiritual bullshit retreat? The one that cost $2,000? That's the one. Jesus, Jake. I'm sorry, man. That's really screwed up. Yeah, it is. But here's the thing, Marty. I need to know if she's been talking about this with anyone locally. You know how people are. They can't keep secrets. Someone's bound to have heard something. I'll ask around, discreetly. I appreciate it. But Marty, don't mention this conversation to anyone yet. I'm still figuring out my next move. Of course, man. Whatever you need. I hung up and turned to find Gina standing in the kitchen doorway with 2 mugs of coffee. She was fully dressed now, ready for work. Calling in favors already? Information is power. I took the coffee gratefully. It was perfect. Strong and black, exactly how I needed it. Sophie thinks she holds all the cards because she's got a lawyer and a sob story about finding herself in Costa Rica. But she's forgetting that I've lived in this town for 7 years too. I know people. What kind of people? The kind who notice things, the kind who talk. I took a long sip of coffee and felt my brain starting to function properly for the first time since yesterday. Sophie's not as careful as she thinks she is. And this Marcus guy? He's about to find out that actions have consequences. Gina checked her watch. I have to leave for work in 10 minutes, but before I go, I want to say something. Shoot. Whatever you're planning, make sure it's legal. I've seen too many good people destroy their lives because they let anger drive their decisions. I'm not angry, Gina. I told you that last night. Then what are you? I thought about it for a moment, trying to find the right word for what I was feeling. It wasn't anger, exactly. It was something colder, more calculated, motivated. That's what worries me. After Gina left for work, I spent an hour on my laptop researching paternity laws in our state. What I found was interesting. Very interesting. In cases where paternity fraud was suspected, the courts could order DNA testing. If the fraud was proven, the person who committed it could be held liable for damages. They could also lose their claim to marital assets, especially if the fraud was part of a larger pattern of deception. More importantly, attempting to coerce someone into accepting paternity of a child that wasn't theirs could be considered a form of extortion, depending on how it was presented. Sophie's exact words came back to me. You can accept this situation and we'll raise the child together as a family, or we can get divorced and you can give me half of everything you own. Your choice. That sounded an awful lot like extortion to me. My phone rang. Sophie's name appeared on the screen. We need to talk, she said without preamble when I answered. I'm listening. Not over the phone. Can you meet me for lunch? Somewhere neutral. Where did you have in mind? The diner on Main Street, 1 o'clock. I checked the time. It was almost 11, which gave me a couple of hours to prepare. Fine. But Sophie, if you're planning to give me the same ultimatum you gave me yesterday, don't bother. I've already heard it. Just be there, Jake. She hung up before I could respond. I spent the next 2 hours doing something Sophie probably wasn't expecting. I got my affairs in order. I called my accountant and asked him to prepare a complete financial statement showing the value of my construction business, our house, and all of our joint assets. I called my bank and moved half of our joint savings into a separate account, not to hide it, but to protect it from any sudden withdrawals Sophie might try to make. Then I did something that felt both necessary and heartbreaking. I went home. The house was empty. Sophie's car was gone, and there was no sign that she'd cleaned up the broken coffee mug from yesterday. I swept it up myself, then walked through the rooms I'd spent years renovating. The hardwood floors I'd refinished by hand, the kitchen cabinets I'd built in my workshop, the bathroom I'd completely gutted and rebuilt when we first moved in. Every room held memories of the work I'd done, the life I'd tried to build. In our bedroom, I noticed that some of Sophie's clothes were missing. Not many, just enough for a few days. She was staying somewhere else, probably with her friend Tessa, who lived in one of those expensive downtown lofts. I opened Sophie's laptop, which she'd left on the dresser. It was password protected, but I knew her passwords. She used the same 3 variations for everything: our wedding date, her birthday, and the name of the cat she'd had as a child. The wedding date worked. Her email was a goldmine. Dozens of messages from someone named Marcus Caldwell, starting about 3 weeks before her trip to Costa Rica. The early messages were flirty but relatively innocent. The later ones were explicit enough to make me close the laptop and walk away for a few minutes. But it was the most recent email that made my blood run cold. It was from yesterday, sent about an hour after our kitchen confrontation. Sophie, don't worry about Jake. He'll come around once he realizes he doesn't have any other choice. Men like him always do. They're too comfortable with their little lives to risk losing everything. Besides, even if he tries to fight this, what's he going to do? He's a construction worker from a small town. You've got a lawyer, you've got leverage, he's got nothing. I'll be back in town next week. We can celebrate then. Ma. I read the email 3 times, and each time it made me angrier. Not just because of the arrogance, but because of how completely Marcus had misunderstood the situation. He thought I was some blue-collar pushover who would roll over rather than risk a fight. He was about to learn otherwise. I forwarded the email to my own account, along with several others that clearly showed the timeline of Sophie and Marcus's relationship. Then I cleared the forwarding history and closed the laptop. By the time I left for the diner, I had a folder full of printed emails, a complete financial statement, and a much clearer picture of what I was up against. Sophie was already waiting when I arrived at Murphy's Diner. She'd chosen a corner booth, probably hoping for privacy. She looked tired, and I noticed she was drinking ginger ale instead of her usual diet soda. "Morning sickness?" I asked as I slid into the booth across from her. "It's not that bad yet. How far along are you?" "About 6 weeks." I did the math quickly. "So this happened pretty early in your 2-week retreat." Sophie's cheeks flushed slightly. "Jake, I didn't ask you here to go over the details of my relationship with Marcus." "Your relationship?" I kept my voice level, but something in my tone made her look uncomfortable. "Is that what we're calling it now?" "You know what I mean." "Actually, I don't. Yesterday you said you met someone and connected with him. Today it's a relationship. Tomorrow maybe it'll be true love. I'm having trouble keeping track of the story." Sophie sighed. "I'm trying to be mature about this, Jake. I'm trying to find a solution that works for everyone. Everyone except me." "That's not true. I think if you really considered the options..." "I have considered the options." I pulled out the folder I'd brought and set it on the table between us. "In fact, I've been doing a lot of research since yesterday." Sophie eyed the folder nervously. "What kind of research?" "The kind that involves understanding my legal rights when my wife tries to commit paternity fraud." Paternity fraud? Sophie's voice rose slightly, and a couple at a nearby table looked over. She lowered it quickly. Jake, that's a terrible thing to say. It's a terrible thing to do. I opened the folder and pulled out a printed copy of Marcus's email. But apparently your boyfriend thinks I'm too stupid to figure it out. Sophie's face went white as she read the email. How did you get this? From your laptop. You really should use better passwords. You went through my personal emails? Sophie, you came home pregnant with another man's baby and gave me an ultimatum. Your right to privacy went out the window when you decided to blow up our marriage. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the email. When she looked up, there were tears in her eyes. It's not what it looks like. It looks like you and Marcus planned this whole thing. It looks like you think you can manipulate me into accepting a situation that benefits you and screws me over completely. That's not true. Then explain it to me. I leaned back in the booth and crossed my arms. Explain how this is anything other than you trying to have your cake and eat it too. Sophie wiped her eyes with her napkin. I made a mistake, okay? I know that. But the baby didn't ask to be born into this situation. Don't you think we owe it to this child to try to make the best of things? We don't owe this child anything, Sophie. You and Marcus owe this child something. I'm just the guy you're trying to stick with the bill. You're my husband. Not for much longer. The words hung in the air between us. Sophie stared at me like she was seeing me clearly for the first time. You're really going to divorce me over this? Sophie, you cheated on me, got pregnant, and then tried to blackmail me into raising another man's child. What exactly did you think was going to happen? I thought you loved me enough to work through this. I almost laughed. Work through this? Sophie, there's nothing to work through. You made your choice when you slept with Marcus. You made another choice when you decided to try to manipulate me instead of being honest about what you wanted. What I want is to save our marriage. No, what you want is to have me subsidize your affair. There's a difference. Sophie was crying openly now, but I felt nothing. Yesterday, her tears might have affected me. Today, they just seemed like another manipulation tactic. So what happens now? She asked. I gathered up the papers and put them back in the folder. Now you call your lawyer and tell him you're going to need a different strategy, because the guy who was supposedly too comfortable with his little life to fight back, he's about to become your biggest problem. I stood up and dropped a 20 on the table to cover both of our drinks. Jake, wait. I paused and looked down at her. What? I'm sorry. I know I handled this badly, but I'm sorry. Sorry you got caught, or sorry you did it? She didn't answer, which was an answer in itself. That's what I thought. See you in court, Sophie. I walked out of the diner and into the bright afternoon sunlight. For the second time in 2 days, I felt like I could think clearly. Sophie had shown me her cards, and they weren't as strong as she thought they were. Now it was time to show her mine. The law office of Patterson & Associates looked exactly like what it was, a place where people went to get divorced and fight over money, gray carpet, generic artwork on the walls, and a receptionist who'd clearly seen enough domestic drama to remain professionally unimpressed by whatever fresh hell walked through the door. Mr. Morrison, Mr. Patterson will see you now. I followed her down a hallway lined with diplomas and legal awards to a corner office where a man in his 50s sat behind a mahogany desk that probably cost more than most people's cars. Jake Morrison? He stood and extended his hand. Tom Patterson, thanks for coming in on such short notice. Thanks for seeing me, I know you're busy. Never too busy for a referral from Judge Harlan's office. Patterson gestured to a chair across from his desk. Gina Morrison speaks very highly of you. I'd called Gina after leaving the diner with Sophie, and she'd made some phone calls of her own. Within 2 hours, I had an appointment with one of the best divorce attorneys in the county. So, Patterson said, settling back into his chair, Gina gave me the basic outline of your situation, but I'd like to hear it from you. Start from the beginning. I told him everything. Sophie's ultimatum, the emails from Marcus, the timeline of her affair, and her threat to take half of everything I owned if I didn't agree to raise another man's child. Patterson took notes while I talked, occasionally asking for clarification or more details. When I finished, he set down his pen and looked at me seriously. Mr. Morrison, I have to ask you this directly. Are you absolutely certain the child isn't yours? Sophie and I haven't had intimacy since February. She's 6 weeks pregnant, which means the baby was conceived in early March while she was in Costa Rica. And you can prove you weren't in Costa Rica? I was working. I have job site photos, employee witnesses, and credit card records showing I was here in Millbrook the entire time she was gone. Patterson nodded. Good. Now, about her ultimatum. Did she put any of this in writing? Not the ultimatum itself, but I have the emails between her and Marcus, including one where he talks about me not having any choice but to go along with their plan. I'd like to see those. I handed him copies of the emails I'd printed. He read through them carefully, his expression growing more serious with each page. This is good, he said finally. Very good. In fact, this is some of the clearest evidence of attempted paternity fraud I've seen in 20 years of practice. What does that mean for my case? It means your wife has made several very serious mistakes. Patterson leaned forward. First, attempting to coerce you into accepting paternity of a child that isn't yours could be considered extortion under state law. Second, her threat to take half your assets based on fraudulent paternity claims could void her community property rights entirely. Entirely? If we can prove she entered into this affair with the intent to defraud you, and these emails suggest she did, then she could be found to have violated her fiduciary duty as a spouse. That means she forfeits her claim to marital assets. I felt something loosen in my chest for the first time in 2 days. So I wouldn't lose the business? Or the house? Not only would you not lose them, but depending on how aggressively we want to pursue this, she could end up owing you damages for the emotional distress and financial harm she's caused. What's the catch? Patterson smiled grimly. The catch is that we have to prove our case, and your wife's attorney is going to fight us every step of the way. This won't be quick, and it won't be pretty. I'm not looking for quick or pretty. I'm looking for justice. Then let's talk strategy. We spent the next hour going over the details of what a contested divorce would look like. Patterson explained that we'd need to file immediately to protect my assets, request DNA testing to prove paternity fraud, and gather as much evidence as possible about Sophie's affair and her attempts to manipulate me. There's one more thing, Patterson said as our meeting was wrapping up. I strongly advise you to document everything from this point forward. Every conversation with your wife, every text message, every interaction. If she's willing to commit paternity fraud, she's likely willing to lie about other things too. Already started, I said, patting my jacket pocket where I'd been keeping a small digital recorder. I recorded our conversation at the diner yesterday. Is that legal in this state? Single-party consent. As long as I'm part of the conversation, I can record it without telling her. Patterson looked impressed. You've done your homework. I had good motivation. By the time I left Patterson's office, it was almost 5 o'clock. I had a stack of papers to sign, a retainer check to write, and a plan of action that extended well into the next several months. But for the first time since Sophie had dropped her bombshell, I felt like I was in control of the situation. My phone buzzed with a text message as I was walking to my truck. It was from Sophie. We need to talk. This is getting out of hand. I typed back, you're right. It got out of hand when you decided to cheat on me and try to blackmail me into raising your boyfriend's baby. All future communication goes through our lawyers. Her response came immediately. Jake, please, don't do this. We can work something out. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. You had your chance to work something out. You chose ultimatums instead. Now you get to live with the consequences. I turned off my phone and drove to the Hammered Nail. I needed a drink, and I needed to talk to Marty about what he'd learned from asking around town. The bar was busy for a weeknight, filled with the usual crowd of construction workers, shop owners, and other locals unwinding after work. Marty was behind the bar, and he nodded toward an empty stool at the far end when he saw me come in. "Rough day?" he asked, sliding a beer across the bar without being asked. "Getting better." I took a long drink and felt some of the tension leave my shoulders. "What did you find out?" Marty glanced around to make sure no one was listening, then leaned closer. "You're not going to like this." "I'm already not liking most things lately. Hit me." Sophie's been talking a lot to anyone who listened about how you two have been having problems, how you've been distant and angry, how she's been feeling neglected and unappreciated. I set down my beer harder than I intended. She's been setting up a narrative. That's what it sounds like to me. Tessa Rodriguez has been spreading it around that Sophie's been struggling with her marriage for months, and that she only went to Costa Rica because she needed space to figure out what she wanted. And now she's pregnant with another man's baby, but somehow that's my fault too. According to the story that's going around, she met this Marcus guy at the retreat and realized what she'd been missing in her marriage. The pregnancy was unexpected, but she's hoping you two can work through your problems for the sake of the baby. Jesus Christ. I rubbed my temples where a headache was starting to build. She's rewriting history to make herself look like the victim. It gets worse. How could it possibly get worse? Tessa's been telling people that you've been drinking too much and that Sophie's afraid of how you're going to react when you find out about the baby. The bar suddenly felt too loud and too crowded. I could feel people looking at me, and I wondered how many of them had heard Tessa's version of events. So according to Sophie and her friend, I'm an angry drunk who drove my wife into the arms of another man. That's the story they're selling, and people are buying it? Marty shrugged. People believe what they want to believe. And a story about a neglected wife who found love with someone else is a lot more interesting than a story about a cheating wife who tried to blackmail her husband. I finished my beer and signaled for another one. Well, they're about to get a lot more interesting story when this hits the courthouse. You're really going through with the divorce? I'm really going through with the divorce, and I'm going to make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what Sophie tried to do. Marty poured my second beer and set it down carefully. "Jake, I've known you for 7 years. You're a good guy, and you don't deserve what she's putting you through. But be careful about how you handle this. Small towns have long memories." So do I. I was halfway through my second beer when the front door opened and 3 people walked in who made my night significantly more complicated. Tom Bradley, Steve Chen, and Mike Rodriguez. 3 guys I'd considered friends until about 30 seconds ago, when I realized that Mike Rodriguez was probably related to the Tessa who'd been spreading Sophie's version of events around town. They spotted me immediately and walked over. Tom, who I'd known since high school, clapped me on the shoulder like nothing had changed. "Jake, how you doing, man? Haven't seen you around much lately." "Been busy with work." I kept my voice neutral, but I was watching Mike Rodriguez carefully. He was Tessa's cousin, and if she'd been talking to family, he probably knew more about my situation than he was letting on. "Yeah, Tessa mentioned Sophie's been going through a tough time," Mike said, confirming my suspicion. "Marriage stuff is hard, man, but you guys will work it out." "Will we?" "Sure. Sophie's a good woman. Sometimes people just need space to figure things out." Steve nodded in agreement. "My wife went through something similar a few years ago. Felt like she'd lost herself, you know? Needed to rediscover who she was outside of being married." "And did she rediscover herself by getting pregnant with another man's baby?" I asked quietly. The 3 of them went silent. Tom looked confused, Steve looked uncomfortable, and Mike looked like he'd been caught in a lie. "What are you talking about?" Tom asked. I'm talking about the fact that Sophie came home from her soul-searching retreat in Costa Rica pregnant with some guy named Marcus's baby. I'm talking about the fact that she gave me an ultimatum: raise his kid or lose half of everything I own in a divorce. Mike's face flushed red. That's not... Tessa said what, Mike? That Sophie was the victim in this situation? That I drove her away with my terrible husbandly behavior? Look, man, I don't know all the details. No, you don't. But that didn't stop you from taking sides, did it? Steve stepped between us. Hey, let's all calm down. This is obviously a complicated situation. It's not complicated at all. I stood up from my bar stool and faced all three of them. My wife cheated on me, got pregnant, and tried to blackmail me into raising another man's child. Then she and her friends started spreading lies around town to make me look like the bad guy. The only complicated part is figuring out which one of you knew the truth and decided to play along with her bullshit story. Tom held up his hands. Jake, I swear I didn't know about any pregnancy. Tessa just said you guys were having problems and that Sophie was trying to work things out. And you believed her without even talking to me? We didn't want to get in the middle of your personal business. But you were fine getting in the middle of it when you thought I was the problem. The bar had gotten quieter around us. Other customers were starting to notice the tension, and Marty was watching from behind the bar with a concerned expression. Maybe we should take this outside, Steve suggested. Maybe you should take yourselves outside, I said. All three of you. Because as of right now, we're not friends anymore. Mike stepped forward, his face angry. You can't blame us for believing what we were told. If you'd been honest about what was really going on, I've been honest. Sophie's the one who's been lying. But instead of giving me the benefit of the doubt, instead of maybe asking for my side of the story, you decided to believe her version because it was more convenient. That's not fair, Jake. You know what's not fair? Having your wife cheat on you and then having your friends take her side because they couldn't be bothered to find out the truth. I threw a 20 on the bar and headed for the door. Behind me, I could hear Tom calling my name, but I didn't turn around. I was done with all of them. Outside in the parking lot, the cool evening air felt good on my face. I was angrier than I'd been since this whole thing started, but it was a clean anger, a useful anger. Sophie hadn't just betrayed me, she'd tried to turn my friends against me. She'd tried to isolate me and control the narrative so that when her ultimatum became public knowledge, I'd be the one who looked unreasonable. It was a smart strategy. It might have even worked if I hadn't found those emails and if I hadn't hired Tom Patterson. But now that I knew what I was dealing with, I could plan accordingly. My phone buzzed with another text from Sophie. Please call me. We need to talk before this gets any worse. I typed back, it's already as bad as it can get. See you in court. Then I blocked her number and drove home to start preparing for war. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed for the first time in 3 days. The house felt different, emptier somehow, even though Sophie had only taken a few things with her. But there was also a sense of possibility that hadn't been there before. Like I was finally free to make decisions without worrying about how they'd affect someone who'd already decided I didn't matter. I made coffee in my own kitchen using my own coffee maker and sat at my own table to review the documents Tom Patterson had given me. Petition for divorce, request for emergency asset protection, motion for DNA testing, and a restraining order preventing Sophie from making any major financial decisions without court approval. It was going to be a busy day. My first stop was the bank, where I met with the branch manager to discuss protecting my business accounts. Sophie had signature authority on our personal accounts, but my construction company was solely in my name. Still, I wanted to make sure she couldn't do anything to interfere with my ability to operate. I understand you're going through a divorce, the manager said, reviewing the paperwork I'd brought. These situations can get complicated from a financial perspective. That's why I'm here. I want to make sure my business stays protected while the legal process plays out. Smart thinking. We can restructure your accounts to require dual authorization for any major transactions, and we can flag your personal accounts to alert you immediately if there's any unusual activity. By the time I left the bank, I felt like I'd built a fortress around everything I'd worked for. Sophie could try to take half of what we'd built together, but she wasn't going to destroy what I'd built on my own. My next stop was the courthouse, where Gina was waiting for me with a stack of forms and a grim expression. "You sure about this?" she asked as we walked toward the filing office. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life. It's just, once you file these papers, there's no going back. This becomes public record. Everyone in town is going to know your business." I thought about my conversation with Tom, Steve, and Mike at the bar last night. Everyone in town already thinks they know my business. At least now they'll know the truth. The filing process took about an hour. Petition for divorce based on adultery and attempted fraud. Request for emergency asset protection. Motion to compel DNA testing. By the time we were finished, I had officially declared war on my marriage. "The sheriff will serve these papers to Sophie within 48 hours, the clerk explained. "She'll have 30 days to respond through her attorney. And until then? Until then, she can't touch any marital assets, and she can't make any major decisions about shared property." I thanked the clerk and walked out of the courthouse, feeling like I'd just fired the first shot in a battle I intended to win. My phone was ringing as I got to my truck. Unknown number. "Jake Morrison." "Mr. Morrison, this is David Klein. I represent your wife in her divorce proceedings." Sophie's lawyer. That was fast. "What can I do for you, Mr. Klein?" I think we may have gotten off on the wrong foot here. Mrs. Morrison is very upset about the papers she was served this morning, and she's hoping we can work out some kind of arrangement without involving the courts. "What kind of arrangement? Perhaps we could meet for coffee? Discuss this like civilized adults?" I almost laughed. "Mr. Klein, your client tried to blackmail me into raising another man's child. The time for civilized discussion ended when she gave me that ultimatum. Mr. Morrison,
Punishing Prospector 8 said AI viewer stream book.
Morrison was proposing.
Com.
There's no misunderstanding. I have her exact words recorded. I also have emails between her and her boyfriend discussing their strategy for manipulating me. If you want to discuss anything, you can discuss it with my attorney, Tom Patterson." "Mr. Morrison, please. Let's not make this more difficult than it needs to be. Mr. Klein, your client made this difficult when she decided to cheat on me and then lie about it. I'm just responding appropriately." I hung up and immediately called Patterson to let him know Sophie's lawyer had made contact. "That was fast," Patterson said. "They must be worried." Should they be? If I were representing your wife, I'd be very worried right now. The evidence you've provided makes this a very difficult case for them to win. Good. Because I'm not interested in settling. What if they offer you everything you want? Full custody of marital assets, no alimony, clean break? I thought about it for a moment. I want more than that. What do you mean? I want everyone in this town to know exactly what Sophie tried to do. I want her friends who've been spreading lies about me to hear the truth. I want her boyfriend to understand that actions have consequences. Patterson was quiet for a moment. "Jake, I understand you're angry, and you have every right to be. But revenge can be expensive, both financially and personally. This isn't revenge, this is justice. Sometimes the line between those two things gets blurry. Not for me, it doesn't." After I hung up with Patterson, I drove to my current job site, where my crew was working on a kitchen renovation for a young couple who'd just bought their first house. It felt good to focus on something constructive for a few hours, something that involved building instead of tearing down. But even there, I couldn't escape the situation completely. Around noon, my foreman Danny pulled me aside. "Boss, I don't want to get in your business, but I heard some things at lunch that I thought you should know about." "What kind of things?" "About you and Sophie. About problems you've been having." I set down my hammer and looked at Danny seriously. He'd been working for me for 3 years, and he was a good guy. If he was bringing this up, it was because he was concerned. What exactly did you hear? That Sophie's been unhappy for a while, that you've been drinking too much and that she's scared of you. And where did you hear this? My wife heard it at the grocery store, from some woman named Tessa. Danny, I want you to listen to me very carefully. Sophie cheated on me while she was in Costa Rica. She came home pregnant with another man's baby and tried to blackmail me into raising it. Everything else you've heard is bullshit designed to make me look like the bad guy. Danny's eyes widened. Seriously? Seriously. And if anyone else on the crew has heard these stories, I want them to know the truth. Jesus, Jake. I'm sorry, man. I had no idea. It's not your fault. But I need to know that my own crew has my back while I'm dealing with this. Of course we do. You're a good boss and a good guy. Anyone who knows you knows that. I appreciate that, Danny. More than you know. But as the afternoon wore on, I started to realize just how effectively Sophie and Tessa had been spreading their version of events. My phone rang 3 times with calls from clients who'd heard I was going through a tough time and wanted to make sure their projects wouldn't be affected. Each time I had to explain that my personal problems wouldn't impact my work, but I could hear the doubt in their voices. By 5 o'clock, I was furious all over again. Sophie wasn't just trying to take my money, she was trying to destroy my reputation and my business. That's when I decided it was time to stop playing defense and start playing offense. I drove straight to Tessa Rodriguez's apartment building, a converted warehouse in the trendy part of downtown. The kind of place where young professionals paid too much money to live in spaces with exposed brick and no parking. Tessa answered her door wearing yoga pants and a tank top that probably cost more than most people's car payments. She looked surprised to see me, and not pleasantly surprised. Jake, what are you doing here? I came to talk to you about the stories you've been telling about me around town. I don't know what you mean. Sure you do. Stories about how I've been drinking too much and how Sophie's afraid of me. Stories about how I've been a terrible husband who drove his poor wife into the arms of another man. Tessa crossed her arms and tried to look defiant, but I could see the nervousness in her eyes. Sophie's my friend. She needed someone to talk to. And you decided the best way to help her was to spread lies about me. They're not lies. Sophie told me. Sophie told you what she wanted you to believe. Did she also tell you that she came home pregnant with another man's baby? Did she tell you that she tried to blackmail me into raising it? Tessa's defiance wavered. That's not... She said you two were trying to work things out. We're not working anything out. We're getting divorced. And when this goes to court, everyone in this town is going to know exactly what your friend tried to do. You can't blame Sophie for falling in love with someone else. Sometimes these things just happen. I don't blame her for falling in love. I blame her for lying about it, cheating on me, and then trying to manipulate me into accepting the consequences of her actions. I pulled out my phone and showed her a screenshot of one of Marcus's emails. This is from Sophie's boyfriend. Read it. Tessa read the email, and I watched her face change as she realized what she was looking at. This doesn't prove anything, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. It proves that Sophie and Marcus planned this whole thing. It proves that they thought they could manipulate me because they assumed I was too weak to fight back. Sophie wouldn't do that. She's not that kind of person. Tessa, the evidence says otherwise. And when this goes to court, a judge is going to see all of it. The emails, the timeline, the ultimatum she gave me, everything. Tessa handed my phone back and looked away. What do you want from me? I want you to stop spreading lies about me. I want you to tell everyone you've talked to that you were wrong about what was happening in my marriage. I can't do that. It would make me look like an idiot. You should have thought about that before you decided to get involved in something you didn't understand. I turned to leave, then paused and looked back at her. Tessa, I've spent 7 years building a reputation in this town. I've built a business, made friends, contributed to the community. I'm not going to let you and Sophie destroy that because it's convenient for your narrative. Is that a threat? It's a promise. If you keep spreading lies about me, I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth, all of it, including the part where you helped Sophie try to cover up her affair. I left Tessa standing in her doorway and drove home feeling better than I had all day. The conversation hadn't been pleasant, but it had been necessary. Sophie and her friends had been operating under the assumption that I would quietly accept whatever story they wanted to tell about me. They were about to learn otherwise. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went through my contact list and started making phone calls. Not to complain or ask for sympathy, but to set the record straight. I called clients, suppliers, other contractors, and anyone else who might have heard Sophie's version of events. Each conversation was brief and to the point. I wanted you to hear from me directly that Sophie and I are getting divorced because she had an affair and came home pregnant with another man's baby. If you've heard anything else, it's not true. Some people were shocked, some were sympathetic, a few were clearly uncomfortable with the whole situation. But by the time I was finished, I'd spoken to 30 people who now knew the real story. My phone rang around 9 o'clock. It was Tom Patterson. "Jake, I just got off the phone with David Klein, Sophie's attorney." "What did he want?" "He wanted to discuss a settlement. Apparently, your wife is very eager to resolve this quickly and quietly." "What kind of settlement?" "She's willing to waive all claims to marital assets in exchange for you agreeing not to pursue the paternity fraud charges." I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. "No. Jake, this is a very generous offer. You'd keep everything, the house, the business, all of your savings. She'd get nothing. Except she'd also get to avoid the consequences of what she tried to do. She'd get to keep her reputation intact, while mine gets destroyed by the lies she's been spreading. You could include a non-disclosure agreement in the settlement. Prevent her from talking about the marriage or the divorce. That doesn't fix the damage she's already done. And it doesn't send the message that needs to be sent." Patterson sighed. "What message is that?" "That actions have consequences. That you can't cheat on your spouse, try to commit paternity fraud, and then walk away like nothing happened. Jake, I have to advise you that going to trial is risky. Even with the evidence we have, there's no guarantee we'll get the outcome you want. Then we'll have to make sure we do get it." After I hung up with Patterson, I sat in my living room and looked around at everything Sophie and I had built together. The furniture we'd picked out, the photos on the walls, the life we'd created. Tomorrow, I was going to start taking it all apart. Not because I wanted to, but because she'd left me no choice. Sophie had started this war when she decided to cheat on me and then tried to manipulate me into accepting it. But I was going to finish it. And when I was done, everyone in Millbrook was going to know exactly what kind of person my wife really was. The courthouse steps were busier than usual for a Thursday morning, filled with lawyers, clients, and the kind of people who showed up to watch other people's lives fall apart in public. I recognized a few faces from around town, including Tessa Rodriguez, who was sitting in the back row trying to look invisible. "You ready for this?" Tom Patterson asked as we walked through the metal detector. "I've been ready since the day Sophie gave me her ultimatum. Remember what we discussed. Let me do the talking unless the judge asks you a direct question. And whatever happens, keep your emotions in check." "My emotions are perfectly in check." Patterson gave me a look that suggested he wasn't entirely convinced, but we were already being called into the courtroom. Judge Patricia Harlan was exactly what you'd expect from someone who'd been dealing with domestic disputes for 25 years. Sharp-eyed, no nonsense, and clearly unimpressed by whatever drama was about to unfold in her courtroom. "This is the matter of Morrison versus Morrison," she announced. "Petition for divorce with allegations of adultery and attempted paternity fraud." Sophie sat at the defendant's table with David Klein, looking pale and nervous. She was wearing a conservative blue dress that I'd never seen before, probably chosen to make her look sympathetic. She didn't look at me when I sat down. "Mr. Klein, I've reviewed your client's response to the petition," Judge Harlan said. "She denies the allegations of fraud and requests an equitable distribution of marital assets. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Morrison acknowledges that the marriage has broken down irretrievably, but she disputes the characterization of her actions as fraudulent. Mr. Patterson, your client is alleging some very serious misconduct. I assume you have evidence to support these claims? We do, Your Honor. Substantial evidence. Then let's hear it. For the next hour, Patterson methodically laid out our case. He presented the timeline of Sophie's affair, the emails between her and Marcus, and the recording I'd made of our conversation at the diner where she'd given me the ultimatum. The courtroom was dead silent as the judge listened to Sophie's voice coming through the speakers. You can accept this situation and we'll raise the child together as a family, or we can get divorced, and you can give me half of everything you own. Your choice. When the recording ended, Judge Harlan looked at Sophie with an expression that could have frozen hell. Mrs. Morrison, is that your voice on the recording? Sophie looked at her lawyer, who nodded reluctantly. Yes, Your Honor. And did you, in fact, present your husband with that ultimatum? Your Honor, I was trying to find a solution that would work for everyone. Mrs. Morrison, I asked you a yes or no question. Did you present your husband with that ultimatum? Sophie's voice was barely a whisper. Yes. And at the time you made this statement, were you pregnant with another man's child? Yes. Judge Harlan made some notes, then looked at Klein. Mr. Klein, does your client wish to dispute the DNA evidence showing that she is carrying a child that is not her husband's? No, Your Honor. We're not disputing paternity. Then what exactly are you disputing? Klein stood up, looking uncomfortable. Your Honor, my client acknowledges that she made some poor choices, but she disputes that her actions constitute fraud. She was attempting to preserve her marriage and provide stability for the child. By threatening to take half of her husband's assets if he didn't agree to raise another man's child? Your Honor, Mrs. Morrison was emotional and not thinking clearly. Mr. Klein, your client consulted with an attorney before making this ultimatum. The evidence shows she planned this conversation. That doesn't sound like someone who wasn't thinking clearly. Patterson stood up. Your Honor, if I may, we'd like to present additional evidence showing that this was part of a coordinated effort between Mrs. Morrison and her paramour to manipulate my client. Proceed. Patterson presented Marcus's emails, including the one where he'd called me a construction worker from a small town who would come around once I realized I didn't have any other choice. The judge read through the emails carefully, her expression growing darker with each page. Mrs. Morrison, are you familiar with these communications between yourself and Mr. Caldwell? Yes, Your Honor. And did you participate in discussions about how to handle your husband's expected reaction to your pregnancy? Sophie looked like she was going to be sick. Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Klein, I have to say that this evidence paints a very troubling picture of your client's conduct. This appears to be a deliberate attempt to defraud Mr. Morrison of both his paternal rights and his financial assets. Your Honor, my client is prepared to waive any claim to marital assets if that would resolve this matter. Mr. Klein, this isn't just about money. Your client has made false statements under oath, attempted to manipulate the legal system, and engaged in what appears to be extortion. These are serious matters that go beyond the scope of a simple divorce proceeding. I felt a surge of satisfaction as I watched Sophie's face crumble. This was exactly what I'd wanted, for her to face the consequences of her actions in front of everyone. Your Honor, Patterson said, we'd like to request that the court find Mrs. Morrison in violation of her fiduciary duty as a spouse, which would void her claim to community property. Your Honor, Klein interjected, that's an extreme remedy. Mr. Klein, your client threatened to take half of her husband's assets based on fraudulent claims about paternity. If that's not a violation of fiduciary duty, I don't know what is. Judge Harlan reviewed her notes for several minutes while the courtroom waited in tense silence. Finally, she looked up. Based on the evidence presented, I find that Mrs. Morrison did, in fact, attempt to defraud her husband regarding the paternity of her child, and did threaten him with financial consequences if he didn't comply with her demands. This constitutes a clear violation of her fiduciary duty as a spouse. Sophie started crying, but Judge Harlan wasn't finished. Therefore, I'm granting Mr. Morrison's petition for divorce and ruling that Mrs. Morrison has forfeited any claim to marital assets. Mr. Morrison will retain full ownership of the family home, his business, and all joint financial accounts. Your Honor, Klein said desperately, my client is pregnant and will need some form of support. Your client should have considered that before she decided to commit fraud. If she needs financial support, she can seek it from the father of her child. Judge Harlan banged her gavel, and just like that, it was over. I had won completely and utterly. As people filed out of the courtroom, I could hear the whispers starting. The story was already spreading, and by the end of the day, everyone in Millbrook would know exactly what Sophie had tried to do. Sophie was still crying as Klein helped her gather her papers. She looked at me once, her eyes filled with a mixture of anger and desperation. I hope you're happy, she said as she walked past my table. I'm satisfied, I replied. There's a difference. Outside the courthouse, Patterson and I were approached by a reporter from the local newspaper. Mr. Morrison, do you have any comment on today's proceedings? I thought about it for a moment, then decided that Sophie had forfeited any right to privacy when she'd tried to destroy my reputation. My wife had an affair, got pregnant, and tried to blackmail me into raising another man's child. When I refused, she and her friends spread lies about me around town to make me look like the bad guy. Today, a judge heard all the evidence and ruled that her actions constituted fraud. I think that speaks for itself. The reporter scribbled notes frantically. What's next for you? I'm going back to work. I have a business to run and a life to rebuild. Any plans to reconcile with your wife? I almost laughed. My ex-wife made her choice when she decided to cheat on me. Now she gets to live with the consequences. That afternoon, I drove to the Hammered Nail to celebrate with a beer and to see if the news had traveled as fast as I expected it to. The bar was packed, even for a Thursday afternoon. Marty was behind the bar, grinning from ear to ear when he saw me walk in. There he is, he called out. The man of the hour. The entire bar turned to look at me, and I was surprised to hear a round of applause. Apparently, the story of my courtroom victory had already made the rounds. Drinks are on the house, Marty announced, for the guy who just proved that cheaters don't always win. I made my way to the bar, accepting congratulations and handshakes from people I'd known for years. It felt good to be vindicated, to have everyone know that I'd been telling the truth all along. Hell of a thing, said Bill Murphy, an older contractor who'd been in town longer than anyone. Takes balls to fight back like that. Sometimes you don't have a choice, I replied. Sure you do. A lot of guys would have just rolled over and taken it. Easier that way. Easier for who? For everyone, but not necessarily right. I was halfway through my beer when the door opened and Tom Bradley walked in. He looked around the bar nervously, spotted me, and walked over. Jake, can I talk to you for a minute? Sure. What's on your mind? I wanted to apologize for the other night and for not giving you the benefit of the doubt. Apology accepted. I feel like an idiot. We all do. We should have known better than to believe Tessa's gossip without hearing your side. I looked at Tom, remembering how quickly he'd been willing to believe that I was the problem in my marriage. You should have, but I understand why you didn't. Do you? Because I'm not sure I understand it myself. You believed what you wanted to believe. It's easier to think that marriages fall apart because of gradual problems than because one person decides to blow everything up with a single selfish decision. Tom nodded slowly. Maybe you're right. Either way, I'm sorry, and I'm glad you fought back. Thanks. That means something. After Tom left, I sat at the bar thinking about everything that had happened over the past week. 7 days ago, I'd been married to someone I thought I knew. Today, I was divorced, vindicated, and starting over. It should have felt like victory, and in many ways it did. But there was also something hollow about it. I'd won the war, but I'd lost 7 years of my life in the process. I'd proven that Sophie was a liar and a cheat, but that didn't change the fact that she'd been lying and cheating. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You destroyed my life. I hope you're proud of yourself." I showed the message to Marty, who was refilling my beer. "Sophie?" he asked. "Probably. Or maybe Marcus. Hard to tell when people won't use their names." "You going to respond?" I thought about it, then typed back. "You destroyed your own life. I just made sure everyone knew about it." Then I blocked the number and put my phone away. "You know what the funny thing is?" I said to Marty. "What's that?" If Sophie had just been honest with me from the beginning, if she'd come home and said she'd fallen in love with someone else and wanted a divorce, I probably would have been reasonable about it. We could have split everything fairly and moved on with our lives. But she didn't do that. No, she thought she could manipulate me. She thought she could have her affair and make me pay for it too. And now? I finished my beer and put some money on the bar. Now she gets to explain to her boyfriend why he's going to be paying child support for the next 18 years while she figures out how to support herself without half of my assets. That's cold, Jake. That's justice. I left the bar and drove home to my empty house. For the first time in a week, it felt like mine again. Not ours, mine. I walked through the rooms I'd renovated, looking at everything with fresh eyes. Tomorrow I'd start making changes. New paint, new furniture, new everything. I was going to erase every trace of Sophie Morrison and start building a life that was entirely my own. But first, I was going to sit on my front porch with a beer and enjoy the sound of silence. No ultimatums, no manipulation, no lies, just peace. For the first time in 7 years, I was exactly where I wanted to be, alone, free, and answerable to no one but myself. Sophie had given me 2 choices: raise her boyfriend's baby or lose everything I'd worked for. Instead, I'd chosen option 3, win everything and let her face the consequences of her own actions. It had been the right choice.
So I did something incredibly brave today, or incredibly stupid. The line between those 2 things has never been thinner. Both my wives were in the same room. Lung Yu, the 6-star killing machine who could snap me like a twig, and Su Chinga, my legally married wife who is currently pregnant with my child. Together, staring at me, in MY living room. And what did my genius brain decide to do? I called them both wife, out loud, to their faces. At the same time, the air in the room dropped to absolute zero. Su Chinga's eyes went so wide I thought they'd pop out. Lung Yu's eye literally twitched.
Herb held her hand over the table. It was clear to her that he was in love with her, but she wasn't sure she felt the same way. She thought life would change when she left Tom, her first husband. He was a good man, a good provider, a passionate husband, and a courteous lover. He just became boring. It wasn't his fault. He was forced to raise 3 children, pay bills, maintain a house, mow the lawn, and trim trees. His job as a high school teacher also occupied his time. After nightly concerts and before school rehearsals, trips, dances, and all the other things that kept him away from her all these years. 25 years. For a quarter of a century, she loved him and watched him transform from the wild rock and roll guitarist she fell in love with into a music teacher in a suit and tie. He was so unique, so stylish, so full of life and talent. She loved his taste, his sense of style from the very first meeting. The 70s were not a time when stylish men were in fashion unless paired with a disco queen. Tom wasn't a disco fan. He wasn't a music snob, but being an amazing trumpet player and guitarist, He was picky about what he listened to. He listened to jazz and classical music most of the time, but had a passion for classic rock. He dressed the same way, in a classic style that was not in fashion, but would be considered stylish by any generation. This man knew how to wear a suit. She loved his body. He took care of himself, running almost every morning and lifting weights almost every night. The first time he hugged her, his power surged through her body like an electric current, making her knees weak. He could easily sweep her off her feet, even years after they had married, and she had acquired some middle-aged baggage on her hips and waist. She loved his face. His rosy cheeks flushed easily as he looked at her. Light brown curly hair that just begs to be held, and piercing blue eyes that sparkle with joy when he looks at her. He was so smart, so well-read, and so passionate about his beliefs, from religion to politics to his favorite sports teams. She knew that the passion would be as strong as the love of his life, and that made him even more attractive. The first time she saw him, his orchestra was playing on the main stage during her college's spring festivals. His voice was mesmerizing, his guitar was incredible. And this is movement on stage. This man knew how to dance. When he soloed, he practically made love to the guitar, waving it around on his side of the stage in such a way that women of all ages craved him to play them too. This passion was visible on his face. He sang songs that he himself wrote, and their lyrics revealed a deep capacity for love. But she could not get closer to him. After the concert, he was surrounded by a crowd, with many women vying to meet the band. She felt uncomfortable in the crowd. They always made it to their van and left as soon as she got closer. She took a sip of her rum and coke, remembering how much she wanted to meet him. Herb squeezed her hand tightly, bringing her back to him. The waiter was clearly waiting for her dinner order. She didn't look at the menu, and there was no need to. Monty's had been her favorite restaurant for many years, and she knew the menu well. She ordered and went back to her memories while Herb began asking the waiter dozens of questions before ordering. Monty was the first place she and Tom were together. She was sitting at the bar, waiting for her friends to show up, when a man plopped down on the bar stool next to her. She followed a band with a guitarist, who was her current dream man. Concert, club, and festival scenes framed her images of him, which were now stored deep in her mind and available for her mental pleasure at any time of the day or night. She still didn't talk to him. The band enjoyed huge regional success and fans followed them wherever they played. She had heard that they sometimes came to Monty's to play a set or two just for fun on a Monday night when the stage at the popular restaurant club near campus wasn't busy. For 4 weeks in a row, she had been showing up with friends in the hope of hearing from and perhaps meeting him. It seemed like her friends had finally gotten tired of supporting what they now considered an obsession. And she was sitting alone today. She barely noticed the man who sat next to her at the bar and ordered a beer and a hamburger, but her ears perked up when the bartender asked him, "Are you guys playing tonight?" She turned her head in his direction when he replied that he was alone and wanted to do a solo set just for fun. Realizing that he was nearby, the object of her obsession, she turned the bar stool around and turned to him. The bartender nodded in her direction, attracting Tom's attention. He smiled, and she froze. He introduced himself, and she began to tell him how long she had wanted to meet him. She was his biggest fan. Looking back, she realized how stupid she must have seemed. She was just another fan to him, pursuing him for what? An autograph? Dance? Songs? Nights in his bed? She didn't want any of this. She just really wanted to meet him, and that's what she finally got. He was so sincere and friendly. She immediately felt at ease and comfortable, and they chatted over dinner like old friends. They had dinner and he sang the part. She listened to him talk about music during the break. He sang another part, she listened, and throughout the next break he talked to her. He walked her home like a true gentleman. He called the next day and asked her to come hear him in concert on Friday. She trembled on the phone, knowing that she was already in love with this man. My darling. Her thoughts went back to Herb. He laughed at the fact that she had her head in the clouds. She made small talk with him until dinner was served. He was a good man and fun to be around. But she couldn't help but compare him to Tom, and he didn't live up to him. The men she dated after the divorce, were somehow deprived of what Tom had. He didn't tell her that Friday night's concert wasn't with his band. He gave her a ticket for dinner and ordered dessert and coffee to warm up before he paid the bill and left. She finished and crossed the street, heading towards the Symphony Hall, wondering what the night had in store for her. It was not the best place for an aspiring rock guitarist. She entered the hall and took her place just as he entered the stage door with a trumpet. Over the next hour, she saw him in a completely different light. The rock guitarist left. Here he is, a serious classical musician playing trumpet with a world-class orchestra, and this man could wear a tuxedo. They began to spend time together. He studied music at the conservatory and financed his education by playing the guitar. He often played with the symphony orchestra as an assistant and on a per diem basis when they needed additional wind instruments. She studied to become a teacher at the university. They both spent more time getting to know each other than they did at school, and were married before the end of the year. "How do you like fish?" Herb brought her back to the present, and she replied that her fish was very tasty. She had to put thoughts of Tom out of her head. It wasn't fair to her companion. She had been divorced for 6 months, and it was time for her to move on. She left Tom hoping to find a surge of excitement, a surge of energy in a life that was becoming increasingly boring and mundane. She managed to start a conversation with Herb, but she didn't really believe in continuing. She remembered the first years of her marriage with Tom. It was very difficult to get a job as a symphonic trumpet. There were many competitors. He managed to have several successful auditions, but they were not intended to fill positions, so he had to re-audition after the entire season ended. Their first 6 years of marriage, 3 of which he was essentially unemployed, rushing to gigs to pay the rent. She tried to change his goals, and in the 7th year of their marriage, he took on a job as a high school teacher. It provided good benefits and a decent salary. After some time, he supplemented this salary by playing guitar in clubs and giving occasional trumpet gigs. In his 2nd year as a teacher, their first child was born. She persuaded him to spend more time at home, and he gradually stopped playing guitar with the band. The trumpet concerts also ceased, as his practice schedule left little time for practice, and his lips lost the stamina that allowed him to continue working with the symphony orchestra. His tuxedo remained wrapped in a plastic bag from the dry cleaner, and his crisp, casual clothes had been replaced by the cheap suits she bought him. He sold his van and replaced it with a practical hatchback that was more economical to run. He never complained about her subtle manipulations. They were sacrifices he was happy to make to ensure the well-being of his wife and daughter. Their 2 sons were born one after another in the next 2 years after their sister. They bought a small house in the suburbs, and she immediately asked for a white picket fence for it. He worked hard, and soon his school orchestra became known as one of the best in the state. He still ran, although not every day, and now more to clear his mind than to stay in shape. Now he played the guitar as his therapy, but on an acoustic one. His electrical and amplifiers collected as much dust in the basement as a tuxedo in the closet. They had 3 children, a dog, and a white picket fence. The American dream. She smiled. She found it difficult to carry on a conversation with Herb. Her thoughts kept returning to boring old Tom. Tom carried all those bags and umbrellas to the beach. Tom ran to open the door for her. Tom held her hand those nights in the delivery room, sharing the labor of the baby's birth. He was always there. Yes, good old responsible Tom. Always willing to make a ridiculously elaborate meal instead of a hamburger. Damn this man who can cook like that. He was a good provider. He even stopped skiing when she told him it was too expensive when 3 kids were eating up their family budget, both at home and away from home, and outgrowing clothes as soon as she bought them. She smiled, remembering how he refused to buy a new suit so that he and the children could have nice new clothes. Unsurprisingly, he began to look less chic in his shabby suits. She lazily finished dinner, smiling at Herb at strategic points in the conversation, so he wouldn't suspect she was distracted. The orchestra was getting ready to perform, and she knew he would dance with her all night. Tom loved to dance. He took her to dance lessons before they went on a cruise because he really wanted to dance with her on the dance floor. She loved it, but then he tried to get her to keep dancing after she injured her leg the following summer. He was ridiculously sullen about her not going to the dance anymore, but she just wasn't ready for it, and she resented his disappointment. As the children grew, their educational activities shaped the family calendar. Sports, theaters, dance classes, and clubs, and the family's minivan fell to Tom while she ran the house like a general. By the time the children reached middle school, she began to seek new experiences, joining book and bridge clubs, and volunteering at the local hospital. She dated writers, the husbands of bridge partners, lawyers and businessmen, and doctors who seemed so charming compared to her husband, a music teacher in a shabby suit. He lost the sparkle in her eyes, and she soon began to lose interest in lovemaking. She knew he was upset, and she knew it was wrong of her. He was a good man and deserved a good wife. She just wanted something more than their ordinary world, more than living in a minivan. They began to move away from each other. The children were away at college, and although they lived in the same house, they lived separately. She didn't know what he did every morning when he left early, but she didn't care. He always came to her at night and followed the routine established throughout his life. She began to look at other men. They looked good. They awakened feelings in her that she hadn't felt since she followed Tom in hopes of meeting her own rock star. Oh, they looked good. She never cheated on him and was proud of it. But she also did not give him what a wife should. And he spent all his time at school, or in the basement workshop, or wherever he went so early in the morning. He wasn't surprised when she left. She told him that she needed more from her life. Their life was boring. She was already tired of the picket fence. It needed to be repainted. She's tired of the minivan. She was tired of his boring suits and boring work. He let her go. He wanted her to be happy and did not want to stay where he was not welcome. He gave her the house in exchange for keeping his pension. Her job provided her with enough income to keep her from asking for child support. He only took his personal belongings and furniture, which were passed down from his family. Of course, he had earned the right to keep the family jewels, and she was sad to part with the anniversary ring he had given her on their 15th anniversary. He had it custom made to match her wedding rings. For it, he used diamonds from his grandmother's rings, which he inherited that year. He bought wedding rings with his inheritance from his grandfather, so when he asked, she tearfully gave him all three. And yet, her life remained virtually unchanged, if not for his absence. The house seemed empty without him and the children, but she got used to it. She moved furniture from the bedroom into their old home office and lived entirely on the first floor. She couldn't afford to sell the minivan, but repairs were quite expensive. She cursed the long driveway that snowy winter. Tom always shoveled her away, but she was never ready for such work. Maybe she could hire the neighbor boy to do the job. She made a mental note that she would also need to find someone to cut the grass this summer. She went on dates quite often. Dan was there and took her skiing for the day. He was terrible, and she spent the entire day remembering her walks with Tom. Tom loved to ski and was very good at it. He trained her perfectly, and she was able to overcome even the steepest slopes. She remembered and deeply regretted that she had made Tom stop doing what made him so happy. Damn, look at how this guy comes into the corner just like Tom did before. Here I am waiting for George to get up and start shaking off the snow, and this guy is tearing up the slopes like we used to. He looks a lot like Tom. Wait, is that Tom? She never caught the mystery skier, but later spotted him in a parking lot driving a shiny new four-wheel drive SUV. George admitted that he loved the symphony and asked her to go with him. Dinner was wonderful as they discussed what they were about to hear. He seemed knowledgeable and remarked that he loved late romantic plays and the way their composers experimented with sound. Today's piece featured backstage brass that will be placed antiphonally throughout the auditorium. The dinner was wonderful and the concert was wonderful. She was beginning to think she had found a man worthy of a second date when George dozed off. His snoring attracted the attention of the head usher, who asked them to leave at intermission. Later, as they sat at the coffee shop next door, George sipped his "wake me up to take me home" espresso while she skimmed the program for the concert she'd half missed. She noticed Tom's name among the trumpeters off stage, and he had just passed her on the sidewalk outside her window. Oh, this man could wear a tuxedo. Would you like to dance? Herb led her back to the table. Of course, Herbie, with pleasure. Sorry, I guess I got distracted today. Dance is just what you need. She danced with Herb, but her thoughts wandered again. She thought about her date with Alan. They worked together, and he had been hunting her for weeks to get her to let him cook her dinner. The wine was wonderful. The music was elegant jazz, which she loved. Tom taught her to understand jazz, Coltrane's ballads. He could tell her all about his every unique ability, tell her what Coltrane did with his variation solo, or he could dance with her in silence. Alan served chicken marsala. Nobody made chicken marsala like Tom. Herb stepped on her foot. Tom never stepped on her foot and always made sure no one noticed when she often trampled on his foot. Why is this man occupying her thoughts so much, damn it? She left this boring asshole, and here she could not tear her thoughts away from him. And why is this singer so similar to him? She finished a series of dances with Herb. He truly was a good man and a great dancer, despite what her aching toe told her. Perhaps she was the one who made a mistake and is now in pain. This meant double meaning to her. Has she ever made such a mistake that it hurt so much later? She was the one who stepped on Tom all the time. Poor guy. He didn't deserve this. Damn, this singer sings his song alone with a guitar that sounds too similar. You said I still have a lot to learn? She immediately recognized the old jazz standard that Tom loved so much, and often hummed to herself when they argued and quarreled. She loved listening to this song when he sang. It was a very personal way of telling her that he was sorry that they had fought before either of them actually uttered words of apology. Please don't think I'm trying not to study. Her heart sank. The vocals were interspersed with the same guitar chords that she had heard so many times in her house when she was his only listener. Since this is an ideal place to learn, teach me today. It had to be him. She had her back to the stage and, not even realizing the fact that her bow was in the middle of a sentence that she completely ignored, she turned her back to him to look at the singer on stage. Starting with the first letters of love, he looked good. The man looked good in a crisp white shirt with a dark green t-shirt peeking out from under the open collar, dark blue jeans, and an olive corduroy jacket completing the ensemble. Leave it to him to pair simple pieces with a suit jacket to look stylish without looking over the top. This man could make jeans look good too, and he could actually wear a suit. Right down to the last letters of love, he must have started running again. He must have started in the mornings when he disappeared before school. He was toned and his chest looked firm and full. I just felt the energy emanating from him, like that first day when he hugged me. Help me find the secrets of love. Oh, come to your mother, baby. I still have many secrets to find, she thought to herself. She hadn't realized how much she missed him until that moment. And never before had she desired a man so much. Teach me today. She was completely oblivious to Herb's attempts to get her attention. She was completely focused on her husband. Hell, her ex-husband on stage singing this song that meant so much to both of them. Beautiful song, beautiful voice, smooth guitar vibes, and such strong memories. The sky is a chalkboard above you. Tears welled up in her eyes as she thought about how she had belittled his profession all these years. His children loved him. Her parents loved him. His work with them was wonderful. The damned husbands of her club friends and the doctors at the hospital could take lessons in school and glamour from him. She was the one who made him wear those suits in the first place, and they were shabby only because they were cheap and old. She saved money by buying him clothes, rummaging through clearance baskets while she bought her own from stylish boutiques. What an ass she was. If a shooting star flies past. The orchestra joined him for this chorus. The rising sounds of synthesized strings enveloped his voice in a rich, velvety accompaniment. Now she was openly sobbing. I would use this star to write "I love you" in the sky 1,000 times. She felt Herb moving behind her. She turned around and saw him putting on his coat. Along with the check, he left a $100 bill on the table. "Happily, dear. I hope you can bring him back." He whispered to her goodbye. "One thing is not entirely clear, my love." She turned around, waiting for her favorite part. "Does a teacher really have to stand so close to my beloved?" Every woman in the house looked at him with the same look. She had already seen this look on his female fans in the old days when they played in his band. It was a look of pure lust. She knew how they felt, and she was sure she had the same expression on her face if she had a mirror to check. "Graduation is almost here, my love." She loved the way his voice always rose above the written melody of that phrase, improvising in a range that made the most of his fine high tenor, bringing the phrase to a natural climax. She felt like she could climax with that line too, if only she could leave him alone, away from those damn drooling bitches in the club. "Teach me today." Jealousy coursed through her veins as they craved her man. "They won't have any of this. She'll rip their eyes out if they get close." Wait. She left him. She divorced him and he allowed her to have her own way. Doesn't he want her enough to fight for her? She has aged gracefully. Okay, she carried a couple pounds more than in her fangirl days. But oh my God, she gave him 3 children. She ran to his house. How could he expect her to retain the magic she had when they were young? A young woman walked to the front of the stage with a tenor saxophone to take a solo. She knew he loved that guitar solo. Why was he giving it to that bitch? This usurper? Damn it. This girl was a fox. She's almost as tall as Tom and so skinny. Just look at that flat stomach sliding into those thigh-hugging elastic pants. Look at that bubble butt and those long, skinny legs. Pointy riding boots. He always thought they were sexy. Nice, big, firm breasts. Well, they should be firm. She can't be older than 22. Oh, he always loved long blonde hair, and she has it shiny and smooth right down to her waist. Look how he looks at her. Her thoughts froze. She thought she would trade it in for a new model, and then she started dating guys who were so boring that she couldn't even bring herself to go to bed with them. It's been 6 months since she filed for divorce, and she's been waiting 6 more for it to be final. A whole year without sex because her datus couldn't compare to dating this boring man, who has now somehow got my magic back. Magic wasn't a strong enough word. Hell, he was magnetic, charismatic, hot, sexually, wonderful. The young woman's solo ended. Tom raised his key and shifted his voice into high gear. His voice came through loud and clear on the final chorus, and the sound engineers rushed down to lower the mic level before it overwhelmed their speakers. The girl remained in front, her sultry sounds of the saxophone joining Tom's voice in a sensual duet. Damn, they had sex and fuck it with sound. Tears in her eyes clouded her view of the two and cast a romantic haze over what she now clearly saw as a May-December couple. She had enough and ran out of the room. She grabbed her coat and asked the woman at the counter to order her a taxi. While she waited, she noticed a poster introducing Tom as the evening's headliner. Through her tears, she could only read his name, but she felt that he should remain in her memory. A reminder of that night and how stupid she had been to refuse him. The taxi ride was the most humiliating moment of her life. The driver realized that she was crying and wanted to be left alone, so he handed her a box of tissues and said nothing. It was lonely in her house. She went upstairs and carefully picked up the artifacts of their lives that the children had left in each room. Although she dusted the bedrooms, they seemed old and musty. The master bedroom was too quiet. The echo of a squeaky mattress protesting vigorous lovemaking, a vision of him donning his threadbare suits. She opened his empty closet and imagined it full of tuxedos and tailored suits. She imagined guitars hanging on an empty wall with an amp underneath for his late-night practices. She sprayed an old bottle of his cologne that was left on the dresser, one of the few things he left behind. She dreamed of spending a weekend in the mountains, skiing all day and making love all night. She suddenly realized that it was her. She was the one who made him so boring. She made him stop skiing. He sacrificed 2 potentially brilliant careers as a guitarist or a symphony trumpeter for the security that teaching brought to his young family. He refused this, willingly sacrificing everything for love, and in the end, she abandoned him. But he never saw anything wrong with it, never expressed regret. He quietly left it and became the best high school band director in the state. He made her look spectacular, and she couldn't see it. He took the children everywhere. They did not need anything. His minivan made growing up luxurious, and she gave it up. Their children were now wonderful adults. And now that she was out of his life, he was back playing his music, dressing well, and, hell, driving a luxury SUV to go skiing. I bet he finally bought either that Porsche or that classic Veta he's always wanted. She pictured Tom in a well-appointed apartment with a dozen sports cars in the garage, cooking his fresh chicken marsala to this pretty young blonde bitch on the deck overlooking the water. It made her cry until she fell asleep. Morning comes too early when sleep passes slowly. She woke up to the singing of these stupid birds. Why should anyone be so happy when she is so unhappy? How happy will she be to sing again? She opened the window and screamed at the birds. Hey, be quiet! Coffee should help. She went to the kitchen and made a full pot of tea. Sure, she would need more than a cup or two. While it was brewing, she grabbed a newspaper from the porch and threw it on the table. The first picture caught her attention. It was Tom and the blonde saxophonist. The photo made her jealous, but before the tears began to flow, she saw the headline on the newspaper she grabbed. Tom Jackson, and alumni provides funds for flood victims in Adams County. Her gaze returned to the article, her eyes quickly drying and her vision becoming crystal clear. The article had a similar headline. Benefit concert raises $165,000 for Adams Middle School. Flood relief drive. She read about the concert. Tom invited some of his most successful alumni to play with him at the club to raise money for victims of the recent floods who were still dealing with the aftermath. It was a 3-day event where children collected donations and local businesses gathered to help these poor people who suddenly became homeless. They raised enough money so that families could buy clothes and begin rebuilding their destroyed homes. The saxophonist was quoted in the article. Jackson's most notable alumni, Sarah Davis, who had stopped working on her new album, her first since winning a Grammy, made the trip from New York to join the man she describes as her favorite teacher and greatest inspiration in this noble endeavor. I adore this man. I lived in this area when I was a child. He helped my family. If my saxophone can help him half as much as it helped me growing up, I'll be here by his side. There was no need to read further. She mistook deep adoration and respect for lust. She completely misinterpreted his response. There was no lust in his response either. It was pride. She finished her coffee and walked up the steps to take a shower. She hadn't showered in the master bedroom bathroom since he left. She was in no hurry. She slowly dried herself with a towel and was just combing her wet hair when the bell rang. She put on a thick terry robe and went down the steps to open the door. It was Tom. Hello? He stood so confidently, jeans and a sports shirt under a brown leather jacket. The combination of the smell of leather and his cologne that she had sprayed herself with last night was enough to almost make her faint. Hi, Tom. I was just getting dressed. Do you want to come in? Yes, thank you. As she softly closed the door behind him, he walked past. I saw you last night at the club and saw you leave upset. Are you okay? She nodded that everything was fine, but her face gave her away. She didn't think he would still be able to read her like a book, but he knew something was wrong. Did Herb Stewart say something wrong? I saw him leave before you, and I just threw some money on the table when your back was turned to him. I know it may be none of my business, but I still love you enough that I can't stand by and watch some guy hurt you. She started crying, and this time, he completely misunderstood her. He started screaming and raving about how he would deal with her, how you deserve nothing but the best, blah, blah, blah. She didn't hear a word. He finally said, I still love you, and it was too loud in her ears to hear anything else. His speech slowed enough for her to calm him down. Herb has always been a gentleman. I don't know why he keeps pursuing me. I've been lukewarm at best towards him, but he keeps trying. Well, you know that the sea, as they say, is full of fish. Yes, I know, but I keep throwing it back. Tom grinned and said good-naturedly, Yeah, I've been in her place. Oh no, I'm so sorry. That's not what I meant, she exclaimed, horrified that she had misspoken. You look good, Tom. You know, I really like this song. Yes, sorry about that. If I had known you would be there, I wouldn't have included her on the list. Somewhat unfortunate on my part. Oh no, baby, I was so happy to hear that. It brought back so many memories. Yes, you wasted a lot of time. I consider myself guilty. No, baby, it's not like that. It was wonderful. It brought back exciting memories. Memories that gave me time to feel guilty and will probably stay with me for the rest of my life. Do you remember why I left you? Yes, I know. I'm bored. Boring jobs, crappy cars, dirty clothes, and all that. You were right. I have become a routine. I took you for granted and immediately got bored with you. Oh no, baby, I was mistaken. I was so wrong. I made you look up from your guitar, from your symphony, from your tuxedos and nice suits, from your skis, and into a shitty minivan. Then I gave up all those wonderful years when you raised children and took care of my family, telling you that I was bored with you. I took from you everything that made your life rich, and then I abandoned you for being so boring. Meanwhile, you were leading this exciting life teaching kids how to win Grammy Awards and create such beautiful music. And I couldn't see it. You put me in the dream home I asked you for. You sent our kids off to college. You were there in sickness and in health. And all I saw were my friends' husbands in fancy cars driving to their jobs. I thought it was so glamorous. Then I started going on dates, and the only men who wanted to spend time with me were fat, bald, and boring. I couldn't ski down the slope without being stopped by some fool who keeps falling. Didn't go to a concert where my beau was awake. Didn't find a guy who could dance decently, sing along to a tune, or cook a decent marsala. I'm alone in a house full of the ghosts of you and the kids. Can't cook, don't eat at home to avoid my own cooking. Can't afford to shovel the driveway when it snows, and when I'm done with it myself. I come, and there's no one to warm me up, make me hot chocolate, or rub my sore shoulders. I'm going to have to mow my own lawn this summer, and damn, Tom, no one compares to you. Nobody. And then, when I finally realized it, you came back with all your magic. Trumpet in the symphony hall, tuxedo. You know I love you in a tuxedo. Singing with the orchestra in the club, your face in the newspaper. Women drool over you, lust after you, and I'm jealous in the house without any right. If you're bored, then please kick me. Baby, please forgive me and come home. Please come and bore me for the rest of my life. I miss you so much. I was so wrong to cheat on you. I was so wrong to leave you after I did this to you. Please. He had heard enough and raised his hand to stop her tirade. Honey, this is very difficult to digest and quite unexpected. The truth is, I never stopped loving you. I waited for you to at least tell me what was really going on in your life. You left this matter in the hands of the lawyers and never looked me in the eye and told me what was going on. I had a feeling that sooner or later you would call me. Have you been waiting for me all this time? He nodded. You play, you spice up your life and get in good shape. You look great, you live well. It's unlikely that you're missing out on anything. Do you want me to believe that you've been waiting for me all this time? Yes, I always promised myself that someday I would return to those things that I really valued when the children graduated. Knowing that they were learning and needed me, I decided to give up these things. Raising children was fun, much better than what I gave up. Glitz and glamour are highly overrated. Now I'm free to live my golden years, although I hardly feel like a golden old man. So I've been skiing a lot this winter, even going to the Alps over the Christmas holidays. She swallowed because she had always dreamed of visiting the Alps and had missed this trip. I bought an SUV to make it easier to get to the local hills and even bought an apartment right on the mountain in Stowey. She loved Stowey. I thought an SUV would also come in handy to tow the yacht this summer, but my condo has a slip available and I moor her there and can actually see her from my living room. She couldn't believe her ears. Condominium on the water with a boat in tow. She loved to sail. He saw the question in her eyes about this place. Yes, he could definitely read her mind. Oh, I should invite you sometime. I love my home. The house has a large kitchen and spacious living room overlooking the bay. 3 bedrooms upstairs, 1 with a small terrace, and since I have the last unit, I can play my music all night in the back room without waking up the neighbors. I have room for an SUV and my car in the garage. Let me guess, you finally bought a Porsche. Yes, I couldn't resist. But I also bought a small hybrid for my daily driving. I keep my Porsche and antiques in the garage I rent nearby. Antiques? Yes, you know that I always wanted to have the same old car as me. In the end, I bought it. Hey, I drove it here today. Let's take it out of town. We can stop for lunch and have plenty of time to talk and catch up. I would like that. She followed him to the car. Here it is, a 59 Vette, a fiery red car with a shiny white leather interior. He treated her as if they had never been apart. She was with him again, and he focused all his attention on her. He looked into her eyes, as always. He spoke to her in a soft voice, without a hint of anger or resentment. Lunch was wonderful. They went to a small seafood restaurant and sat in the sun. He ordered his favorite chowder and swordfish steak. He always knew what to order and never hesitated. Same old Tom. How does he always do this? How could she think that someone who read her the way he did was boring? They continued north to the park they loved to go to when they were younger. They walked up a hill to an old logging road that provided amazing views of the surrounding countryside and the Sound all the way to Long Island. It was an idyllic day, and she wondered why she had left him in the first place. He was a gentleman in every sense of the word, reminding her at every turn of the energetic young man he had been when they first met. He talked about the symphony, the graduating students who returned to play, and the wonderful careers they had in music as professionals. He told her how much he wrote, and that some of his songs had been bought and recorded by famous singers. He paid off his entire share of their debts before the divorce, bought cars with the advances he received, and traveled every chance he got. They talked through the beautiful sunset, and by the time they got home, she was sure she wanted him back. He accepted her offer to have a cup of coffee. She never made coffee. Once inside, she could not stand it and began to pour out her thoughts on him. She was devastated at leaving him, and only realized how much he meant when she realized he was actually gone. She begged him to give her another chance. She swore to him that she had not been in a serious relationship with another man, had not had any sex, and had not enjoyed kissing on the few dates that had gotten this far. Why is it so important to tell me about this? I want you to know that I have always loved you, that no man can compare with you, that I have never given myself to anyone. I'm yours if you want me. If it's that important, then I'm not sure you'll want me. He stopped and looked into her eyes. Although it's true that I was waiting for your call, I didn't stop having sex. He described feeling lonely and how he sought a relationship once the divorce was finalized. He told her that he had never even thought about cheating on her, but once he was free, he had an incredible appetite for relationships with women, and that included a hunger for a lot of variety. He started running in the mornings even before she decided to leave him, and went to the gym almost every day to swim or lift weights. He took off his wedding ring the same day he received his divorce notice, and the women at the gym noticed he was missing that same day. Word of this also spread throughout the faculty, and although he was reluctant to start a romantic relationship with a colleague, dinner invitations immediately began, which were now forever part of hangouts with single friends. The level of flirting increased dramatically, and suddenly, accidentally, open blouses and short skits became common even among women he considered conservative. On the day the divorce was finalized, his friends threw him a party where he was rubbed and groped from all sides, both in the bar and on the dance floor. That night he resumed his sex life and soon found himself in the company of a lovely, lonely woman almost every night for a week. His music began to quickly pay off, and having money and good cars only strengthened his image. He began to dress well again, as he no longer had family needs to put first. The condo followed suit, and he hosted several parties and get-togethers there. never forgetting to entertain one special lady for much longer than the rest of his guests, often until breakfast the next day. He brought to life many of the fantasies they so playfully talked about. He didn't even want to think about starting a serious relationship until she was ready for it. Her eyes were downcast. She understood everything, but something hurt terribly. She freed him for this, and knew that she would have no rights when they were no longer married. Somehow, she believed that he would always be there when she left him, devoted to her, only for her. She left him for something more exciting, and not only did he find his old magic that made him excited, he didn't hesitate to use it. This changed everything. The first time he fell in love with her, they were both young and inexperienced. Now they are older, wiser, and more experienced lovers. And now he went where she had never been allowed in their married life. Tom withdrew from their exclusive private life to indulge in pleasures of which she did not approve, and she let him go to do so. For the first time, she realized that a new lover was easily aroused, not because he was better or even good, but because there was a thrill of meeting someone new. Tom loved it. How could he be excited to be around her again? Look, I can imagine that this seems strange to you, but I'm not going to hide what I've been doing for the past year. I don't know what the future holds for us, but I know what happened in my recent past. I know that the present holds a lot of uncertainty. I don't want to fall in love with you again, only to be dumped after a year or two. I need some guarantees before I can erase this uncertainty from my mind. I need to protect myself. You cleaned me out during the divorce, yet I was lucky enough to restore both my life and my fortune. Any kind of repetition for us would mean an ironclad contract, giving me a guarantee of preserving the wealth that I have accumulated in the event that we separate again. This must be the price of you leaving me the first time. There was a lot to think about. He knew it and kissed her forehead before walking out gracefully. He promised to call her the next weekend, but also told her not to be surprised to hear about his date, since he really enjoyed it and wasn't going to stop until they made a decision. She knew that the bouts of jealousy she was experiencing were unjustified. She let him go. No, it was a lie. He was the one who let her go when she unceremoniously left him after many years of a happy marriage. What was she thinking? And now she found herself embroiled in a fight for the only man who had ever made her happy. He called the next day to invite her to dinner on Saturday night. She spent a week worried about their meeting, but not understanding what he wanted to do. Who was he dating? Were they younger, more beautiful? She replayed the film of their life together in her head over and over again, searching for the key that could unlock the secret of his return. He was very frank with her, and not in a way that scared her off, just frank. She left him because of emotional unrest, and no one else interested her. However, he was a real playboy, and she was ready to do whatever it took to get him back. On Friday, she went to happy hour dinner with fellow girls. The news that she's trying to reconcile with her ex has caused so much commotion at work this week that their usually small table has been filled with an all-female military cabal of conspirators. In their opinion, Tom has already been caught. The conversation moved from what she should wear to a game of what if. And for this, the woman tried to extract any juicy bits of gossip from her, preparing her for any eventuality. The conversation on sexual topics flowed along with the wine. By the time she was ready to leave, she wondered why Tom hadn't left her for another woman. The girls convinced her that she dressed too conservatively, that she was too vanilla in the bedroom, and that she was too reserved to win Tom back. She and Carla were the last ones at the table when she noticed Tom and his companion. This woman was simply stunning. She was tiny but looked tall in those fuck-me heels. She has a figure with a pair of luscious, pert breasts that would make any man stutter, drool, and stammer. The short, tastefully tailored skirt revealed long legs that invited you to dance, and not only on the public dance floor. She was great. She was hot. I suddenly remembered a past happy hour group conversation. Her shoes were always fairly flat, the hems covered the knees, and the neckline never gave a hint of cleavage. Her underwear was practical and comfortable. His daughter teased him for a long time about her grandmother's pants, and Tom often called her outfit along with the long flannel pajamas that she loved so much. Armor. She looked around at her current outfit, old-fashioned and baggy. She remembered all those nights when Tom wanted to make love to her, and she completely rejected him. She thought about those nights when Tom wanted something special, and realized that many nights he caressed her, kissing her body as she squirmed in climax, but she rarely touched any part of his body below the shoulders with her lips. She thought about how patient he had been when she was pregnant, when she had hurt her leg, and other times when she had not been ready to make love. How could she be so selfish as to leave him, calling her life with him boring? She started crying, bitterly. Carla noticed this and hurried to console her friend. Between sobs, she pieced together a picture of a lonely, insecure woman who had taken the love of a good man for granted and now wasn't sure she could get it back. But Carla's words became less comforting when Tom took to the dance floor, twirling his sexy young partner to the sounds of a hot Latin band performing. This man always knew how to dance. Damn, Carl, I'm a B-movie and he moved on to leading roles. Darling, tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, I want you to be ready. You have a date with this man tomorrow night, and I will personally make sure you are ready. The B-movie is my ass and you are an Oscar waiting in the wings. True to her word, Carla knocked on the door promptly at 9 swaus. They spent the morning at the day salon, making sure every bit of skin was exfoliated and moisturized, while hair was combed and nails buffed to a shine. Lunch was served in the boutique while the salon staff milled around her. She left the spa a completely different person. Of course, she also managed to absorb a lot of Carla's advice on how to win a man, and felt fully trained in the art of massaging both the male ego and body. Finally, the highlight came when the women returned home and they spent an hour with ice cream cones, lollipops, and a bunch of bananas in Carla's crash course. Tom reached out to knock on the door, but stopped abruptly when he saw a note inviting him to enter. She called up to him and said that there were snacks on the coffee table. Okay, I stacked the deck. He loved seafood, so I expected him to have shrimp and his favorite Belgian ale in a bucket of ice. In fact, I had not yet prepared. I was waiting impatiently, and when I saw that he had arrived, I ran upstairs so as not to seem alarmed. Oh, the games we play, right? I wanted to make a way out. It was like prom night. Tom definitely noticed my appearance. My little black dress hugged my figure perfectly. Sexy, but with dignity befitting a woman my age. I never showed that much cleavage, but my breasts were still nice, and my hemline was high enough above my knee to say flirt with me, without saying, I'll sleep with you for a price. I wore a string of pearls he bought for Christmas on a whim last year, and matching drop earrings he bought for his last anniversary. Black stockings adorned my sexy legs, but the real message was sent with the high stiletto heels that said, "You might get lucky today, stud." He complimented me, and it was a little awkward that our kiss lasted so long. I was pretty sure he was going to walk me back to the bedroom. Damn it. It had been so long, and the promise of making amends and bringing back the love of my life had me throwing myself at him, ready to drag him up there and ravage him. He looked so good. This man can wear a suit. Oh, yes, he can. Yes, he can. Why the hell do I think I should bring him back? The dinner was delightful. He doted on me, and I devoured his attention alive. A small Japanese restaurant, candles, soft music, and this tie was the exact same color as his eyes. He took me to a small jazz club where everyone knew him. He even sat on guitar for a couple of songs, managing to look me in the eyes as he soloed. He played so passionately that I felt as if he was making love to me right there with his music. He brought me home and kissed me on the porch, saying goodnight. I had to invite him for a cup of coffee. He complied, but as soon as the door closed, he reminded me that my coffee-making skills were below the required minimum. True, I agreed, but I'm really good at making breakfast. I pressed my lips to his. He stayed for breakfast. I liked the food, although not as much as the day before. I made sure he knew I wasn't a B-movie or a warm-up or a flip side. When I said I had a plan, that also applied to the bedroom. I could no longer lay claim to the novelty of his new flame, but I knew it inside and out. I knew what he liked, and I knew what he wanted that I didn't give him. I knew where to scratch with a familiar hard object that only a wife could wield. It wasn't the first time I had been satisfied with his manhood, but I had never been delighted and, of course, expressed disgust at the thought of tasting him during the climax. He didn't mind my eagerness and responded by squirming under my control. When it became obvious that he was about to reach the finish line, I let him. When he tried to break free, I didn't let him, remembering this part of Carla's training clearly. Suddenly, I wanted to try it more than anything else, and I enjoyed it. We both came to the finish line several times that night and the next morning. We spent breakfast and lunch making love again. When he was about to go home, I stopped him to say the last word. I need to apologize. There had to be a better way to spice up our lives, and I chose the cowardly route of leaving you. I know I can't turn back time or make it up to you, but I want you to know that I'm here for you. I don't want to date other men anymore. No one can compare to you. So why try? I will never stop berating myself for thinking that anyone could compare to you. Somewhere in my fucked up brain, I thought going out and having sex with other guys would make me feel good. But every time I found myself in an intimate situation, I found myself missing our love. I never got around to sex because I never felt like I wanted it. I just kept feeling you in my heart. How ironic. I left you for a wild love life and couldn't bring myself to go through with it. You had no interest in looking beyond our marriage and started an active love life. Tom, if you never pester me again, I will always remember last night as the best night of my life, the night you came home. I will always be there whenever you want. Dinner? Certainly. Dancing? Certainly. Card game? Yes. Take a ride out of town? Please. You can make love to me, or come here quickly, or fuck me until I lose consciousness. I'll be there for you. From time to time, regularly, or all the time I am yours, you suit me in every way, and I want you in every way. I have no right to expect anything, so this is an offer, not a request or demand, and this is an open offer. Take me into your life as much as you want. As much as I want? Well, yes. What if this never happens? I made this mess myself. What if this is forever? I will make you happy in every way, and you will never regret it. What if it's somewhere in the middle? I'm not stupid. If I have to share with you, I will. I'll be jealous, but you'll never see it. I had the right to be exclusive to you and gave it away. This is a difficult decision. I need time, but you will definitely see me more often. Tears welled up in my eyes as I hugged him, knowing that there would be at least some place for me in his world in the future. He called me later that evening and asked me out on a date in 3 weeks. He also made a couple of lunch dates, but said he had a lot going on and needed to give up a real date for a while. However, the lunch dates were amazing. Thus, we managed to meet 7 times. I was very excited, but I suspected that he had something else up his sleeve, so I avoided talking about Tom and I with my children. And the night of the date was approaching again. He told me to dress casually. He wanted to cook me dinner and then go to the movies. I arrived at his apartment and noticed that the table was set for 6 people. Tom always cleared the table immediately after eating so that the kitchen did not become a cluttered workshop for homework and arts and crafts, but was a table for family meals. When the children left for college, he continued to rearrange their cutlery, insisting that they always needed a place at the family table. Tom, I can't believe you're still setting up seats for everyone, including little Tommy's fiancée. Tell me, have you always prepared a place for me? Before he could answer, the patio door opened and little Tommy walked into the room. Funny name. At 6'4", he looked down on both me and Tom. Julia's hand was in his as she walked in next to him. Yes, Mom, he always did that. At first we teased him, but he stubbornly stood his ground and insisted that this is our family table, and as our mother, there will always be a place for you. Julie broke the awkward, emotional silence with a giggle. So when I leave you for a nicer guy, there will still be room for me? Not really, Julie. It was the unmistakably ringing voice of James, my youngest son. First, you must give birth to a grandson. Family is not just a legal thing, it's a blood thing. You can't just get married, you have to earn it. So you two will have to either have a baby or you will become a widow. Tommy thought about the choice. To have a child or become a widow. Which should I choose? We all laughed as he threw Julie over his shoulder towards the stairs leading to the bedroom. He didn't go far as my daughter was on the way down. She inherited my love of going on stage. Hi, Mom. Hey, the whole gang's here. Wait a minute. What is this? I love you guys, and I'm glad you're all in town. But today I have a date. How can I have fun with your father while you're here to distract him? You will find out after we eat. We hadn't even touched the table settings when he led us out to the patio for a grilling feast. Grill, wine, conversations, and pleasant memories flowed like a river. We all helped clean up, and then Tom served dessert and coffee. I invited you all to a family meeting today. Julia stood up to apologize. Sit down, young lady. A plate on this table entitles you to full participation in the family, including meetings. We had a very difficult period last year, and it's not over yet. There have been some drastic changes then, but it looks like it's time to settle things down. I need you all to be witnesses. He stood up and looked at the children, but stood with his back to me. Your mother made it clear to me that she loves me as much as I thought all these years. She did leave me, and I still have strong feelings about it, but it's just between the two of us. I have a proposal to reconcile these two feelings, and I have printed it in a letter so that she can review it alone or with me. He turned to me and handed me a sealed manila envelope with the inscription, "Open only when you really want it." When he turned back to the children, and I didn't notice, he put his hand in his pocket. I thought long and hard about this. She took me by surprise when she said she missed me and wanted any part of my life, any rollie I gave her. As I was thinking about this, I noticed something obvious. The answer was right there on the table. Her place was still taken. So soft, this handsome man. He turned around, knelt down, and took his hand out of his pocket. His deep blue eyes froze me, and then his voice melted me when he spoke. Nothing like, "Will you marry me?" or "Be my wife," could compare to the perfection of his proposal. "Please come home." Yes, there were hugs and tears all around, and I felt like the world had become right. We had fun with the children until dawn and went to bed completely exhausted. No, we didn't have sex that night, and our lovemaking consisted only of a couple of sweet goodnight kisses and a sound sleep in each other's arms. We knew we would have time for sex later, and believe me, we made up for lost time and then some. I think that absence probably makes the heart grow fonder, and we got married on a quiet Wednesday evening in our church with only the children as witnesses. But that was only after I had signed the prenuptial agreement that was contained in the envelope Tom gave me when he proposed to me. It read, "I agree that I love Tom Carnes with all my heart, and if I am ever found to be breaking my second marriage vows to him, I relinquish all rights to my property, my dignity, and my body hair. Thus, I will be forced to leave my house naked, with my head and body shaved, onto the front lawn, and taking nothing with me. I also agree to make a fool of myself as I leave by hopping on one leg, alternately singing nursery rhymes and squawking like a chicken. Before my departure, I agree to alert the media and arrange for coverage of the event. I understand that none of this will ever happen, so I readily agree, fully understanding the value of the phrase, 'till death do us part.' I was wearing a white dress, not a symbol of virginity or purity, but a symbol of starting over with a clean slate. He was wearing a new suit. I know you've heard this, but hey, this man can wear a suit. I giggled at the prenuptial agreement. This person can tell a joke. I signed. Do you promise? I promise. Do you promise? I promise. We kissed. I'll tell you about my honeymoon. Come to think of it, no, I won't. You should have seen it. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one. Listening to the next one. Listening to the next one. Listening to the next one.
Welcome to Her True Stories. If you love stories of resilience, transformation, and standing up for yourself, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring content like this. Today's story proves it's never too late to discover your worth. My name is Mara Joshua, and I'm 76 years old. For most of my life, I believed that being a good mother meant disappearing into the background, making myself small so others could shine bright. I was spectacularly wrong about that, but it took my daughter Rebecca and her husband David excluding me from their family vacation to finally open my eyes. Let me start at the beginning because context matters in stories like this. I've lived in the same house in Phoenix for 38 years, ever since my late husband Robert and I bought it when Rebecca was just 2 years old. Robert died of a heart attack when Rebecca was 12, leaving me to raise her alone while working as a high school English teacher. Those were lean years financially, but when my mother passed away 10 years ago, she left me a substantial inheritance, nearly $400,000 that I'd invested carefully with the help of a conservative financial advisor. I never told Rebecca about the inheritance. Not because I wanted to keep secrets, but because I'd grown up during the Depression and learned to save money for emergencies. What if I got sick? What if Rebecca needed help with Sophie's college fund? What if the market crashed? So the money sat in safe investments, earning modest returns while I continued living on my teacher's pension like I always have. Rebecca married David 8 years ago, and I tried my best to welcome him into our small family. David came from money. His father owned a chain of auto dealerships across Arizona, and his family was large, loud, and had very definite opinions about everything. His mother, Martha, always made little comments about my simple lifestyle and my quaint little house, while David's siblings treated me with polite indifference. But I told myself this was normal. Blended families took time to mesh, and I was just the mother-in-law after all. My role was to support Rebecca's happiness, even if that meant accepting that I'd never be truly welcomed into David's family circle. The pattern started small. Rebecca would call when she needed babysitting for 9-year-old Sophie, my granddaughter, but our conversations rarely extended beyond logistics. Can you pick up Sophie from school on Tuesday? We have a work thing. Could you watch her this weekend? David's parents want to take us out for dinner. Always asking, never offering. Always assuming I'd say yes, never considering that I might have plans of my own. Not that I usually did have plans. My social life had withered over the years as I'd focused more and more on being available for my family. My old teaching colleagues had drifted away after retirement, and I'd let friendships lapse because Rebecca might need something. I'd turn down invitations because what if there was an emergency? What if Sophie got sick at school and Rebecca couldn't leave work? I'd made myself indispensable by making myself invisible. The Thursday when everything changed started like any other. I was deadheading roses in my garden, a hobby I'd taken up to fill the empty hours, when my phone rang. Rebecca's name flashed on the screen, and I felt that familiar flutter of anxiety mixed with hope. Maybe she was calling just to chat. Maybe she wanted to grab lunch together. Maybe she was thinking about me as a person, not just as free childcare. Mom, I have the most exciting news. Rebecca's voice practically sparkled through the phone. David finally got that promotion to senior partner, and we're going to celebrate with that big family trip to Las Vegas we've been talking about. My heart lifted. We discussed this trip for months, ever since Sophie had seen a documentary about Las Vegas shows and become obsessed with the idea of seeing real magicians and acrobats. Rebecca had shown me brochures of family-friendly shows, talked about the museums and attractions we could visit together, even mentioned a spa day that might be fun for us girls. That's wonderful, honey, I said, setting down my gardening shears. When do we leave? I'll need to arrange for someone to water my garden, and I should probably. Actually, Mom, Rebecca interrupted, and I heard that slight shift in her tone that always made my stomach clench. That's what I need to talk to you about. David's family really wants to join us for the celebration, and you know how important family is to them. I did know. David's family was large and close-knit in the way that made me feel like an outsider looking in. His parents, Robert and Martha. His 3 brothers, Tom, Mark, and James, along with their wives and children. His sister Emma and her husband Brad, plus their 2 teenage sons. When they all got together, they filled rooms with their voices and their shared history and their inside jokes that I was never quite part of. How many people are we talking about? I asked, though I was already beginning to sense where this conversation was headed. Rebecca's pause stretched just a little too long. Well, with David's parents, his siblings, and their families, probably around 15 people total. 15 people. I did quick math in my head. With Rebecca, David, Sophie, and me, that would make 19 people. That's quite a group, I said carefully. Where are we all going to stay? That's the thing, Mom. Another pause. David found this amazing vacation rental house through his firm's corporate travel agent. It's supposed to be incredible, right on the strip, with a pool and game room and everything. But here it comes, I thought. But it only accommodates 15 people exactly. The bedrooms and everything are set up for that specific number. I felt something cold settle in my chest. I see. I'm so sorry, Mom. We really wanted you to come, but there just isn't space. The house is already booked and paid for, and changing it now would be impossible. Maybe we can plan something special, just the 3 of us, when we get back. I stood there in my garden, surrounded by the roses I'd spent 5 years cultivating, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. Of course, dear. I understand completely. You're amazing, Mom. I knew you'd understand. You always do. After I hung up, I sat heavily on my garden bench and stared at my hands. These hands had packed Rebecca's lunch every day for 12 years after Robert died. These hands had sewn her prom dress because we couldn't afford to buy one. These hands had held her during her difficult labor with Sophie, had babysit that same granddaughter countless times, had prepared dozens of holiday dinners for David's family even when they barely acknowledged my efforts. But apparently, there wasn't room for these hands on a family vacation. I tried to rationalize it. 15 people really was a lot to accommodate. Maybe the rental house truly couldn't fit any more guests. Maybe this was just one of those unfortunate situations where someone had to be excluded, and that someone happened to be me. I almost convinced myself until I remembered something Rebecca had mentioned weeks ago. David's sister Emma was going through a rough divorce and probably wouldn't be up for family events for a while. Yet somehow Emma and her husband were part of this 15-person count. That evening, I did something I'd never done before. I looked up David's family on social media. I'd always been proud of not being one of those snoopy people who stalked others online, but tonight I felt compelled to investigate. It took me longer than it should have to navigate Facebook properly. Technology had never been my strong suit, but eventually I found David's brother Tom's profile. What I saw there made my blood run cold. Posted just 3 hours earlier was a photo of an enormous vacation rental house in Las Vegas. The caption read, "Can't wait for the Joshua family reunion. This place is going to be epic. 16 bedrooms, 12 bathrooms, private pool, game room, full kitchen staff. Room for up to 25 guests. 25 guests." I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. Not only was there room for me, there was room for 9 additional people. I scrolled through the comments, my heart sinking further with each one. "So excited to finally have a family vacation," wrote Jennifer, Tom's wife. "The cousins are going to have such a blast," commented Mark's oldest daughter. And then, at the bottom, a comment from Martha, David's mother, that felt like a knife to the chest. Finally, a family vacation with just family. No outsiders to worry about accommodating.
No outsiders.
I was an outsider at my own daughter's family celebration. I closed the laptop and sat in my dark living room, surrounded by photos of Rebecca throughout the years. Rebecca's high school graduation, where I stood beaming beside her because Robert hadn't lived to see it. Rebecca's wedding, where I'd walked her down the aisle since her father wasn't there. Rebecca in the hospital holding newborn Sophie, with me right beside the bed, tears of joy streaming down my face. In every photo, I was present, supportive, loving. But when it came time for making new memories in Las Vegas, I was just an outsider who didn't fit into their perfectly planned family unit. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, something sharp and unfamiliar growing in my chest. It wasn't just hurt anymore. It was anger. Clean, clarifying anger that made me see my situation with startling clarity. For 34 years, I'd been Rebecca's mother. I'd sacrificed, supported, and enabled. I'd made myself smaller and smaller to make everyone else more comfortable. I'd convinced myself that love meant never asking for anything in return. But love was supposed to be mutual, wasn't it? Love was supposed to include respect, consideration, basic human decency. What I'd been giving wasn't love. It was servitude. And what I'd been receiving in return wasn't love either. It was exploitation. As the first light of dawn crept through my bedroom windows, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to accept this. I wasn't going to smile and nod and pretend it was okay to be excluded from my own family's life. I was going to do something. The next morning brought another phone call from Rebecca, this time with her voice bubbling over with excitement about their upcoming travel plans. She rattled off details about the shows they planned to see, the restaurants David's family had researched, the pool parties they were organizing at the house. It sounds wonderful, I managed to say, though each detail felt like salt in an open wound. Oh, and Mom, I hate to ask this, but would you mind checking on our house while we're gone? You know, bringing in the mail, watering the plants, keeping an eye on things? We'll be leaving Sunday and won't be back for 8 days. Sunday. They were leaving in 2 days, and she was just telling me now about house-sitting duties. Of course, honey. You know I'm always happy to help. You're a lifesaver, Mom. I honestly don't know what we'd do without you. After she hung up, I sat at my kitchen table with my morning coffee and thought about that phrase. I don't know what we'd do without you. It sounded affectionate, but what it really meant was, I don't know how we'd manage our lives without your free labor. I'd become the family's unpaid employee, and I'd been so eager to be needed that I'd never noticed the difference between being valued and being used. My phone rang again, interrupting my thoughts. The caller ID showed a name I hadn't seen in months, Helen Morrison. Helen had been my closest friend during my teaching years, and we'd stayed in touch after retirement until I'd started declining her invitations because Rebecca might need something. Helen was blunt, opinionated, and had never been afraid to tell me hard truths I didn't want to hear. Mara Joshua. Helen's voice was sharp with mock indignation. Are you avoiding me? Of course not, I said, though we both knew it was partially true. I've just been busy. Busy being taken advantage of by that daughter of yours, I'm sure. When's the last time we had lunch? When's the last time you did anything for yourself instead of jumping every time Rebecca calls? I felt heat rise in my cheeks. Helen, that's not fair. She's my daughter. Family comes first. Family should come first, yes. But that doesn't mean you should disappear. Tell me, what have you done for fun in the past month? What plans have you made that didn't revolve around your daughter's convenience? I opened my mouth to answer and realized I couldn't think of anything. When had I become so small? When had my entire identity shrunk down to being Rebecca's helpful mother? That's what I thought, Helen said, but her voice was gentler now. Mara, you're one of the most intelligent, interesting women I know. But you've been hiding that light under a bushel for so long, I think you've forgotten it exists. I don't know what you mean. I mean you have money saved up that you never spend on yourself. I mean you Jack Morrison had been married to my friend Helen for 40 years before their amicable divorce 5 years ago. He was 78, recently retired from his successful law practice, and had always been one of my strongest advocates during the years when I was doubting myself. Mara? His voice was surprised but warm. Is everything okay? Jack, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Always am with you. You know that. Am I a doormat? The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Jack, I'm here. I'm just trying to figure out how to answer that without hurting your feelings. That's a yes then. Mara, you're one of the kindest, most generous people I know. But there's a difference between being generous and being taken advantage of. I told him everything. About the Las Vegas trip, about being excluded despite the house accommodating 25 people, about finding the papers that proved this had been planned for months, without any consideration of including me. When I finished, Jack was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he said, "What are you going to do about it?" What do you mean? I mean, are you going to keep pretending this is acceptable? Are you going to welcome them home with a smile and a casserole, pretending nothing happened? Or are you finally going to stand up for yourself? I'd never heard Jack speak so directly about Rebecca before, and it should have made me defensive. Instead, it made me feel oddly relieved that someone else could see what I'd been trying to deny. I don't know, I admitted. Well, you've got 8 days to figure it out. And Mara, you deserve so much better than this. You've always deserved better. After I hung up, I sat in my car until the sun went down, thinking about Jack's question. What was I going to do about it? For 76 years, I'd been the woman who accommodated, who understood, who never made waves. I'd been the convenient mother, the reliable grandmother, the person everyone could count on to say yes. But what if I said no? What if I stopped being convenient and started being honest? What if I stopped hiding my light under a bushel and let everyone see exactly who I really was? The idea was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. As I finally walked to my front door, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to confront Rebecca directly. I wasn't going to make accusations or demands. I was going to do something much more powerful. I was going to show her exactly what she'd chosen to exclude from her family celebration. I was going to Las Vegas. I spent the entire weekend in a state I can only describe as controlled fury. Not the explosive, destructive kind of anger, but the cold, clarifying kind that strips away illusions and shows you exactly where you stand. I wasn't just hurt by Rebecca's exclusion anymore. I was insulted by the transparent lies, offended by the casual disregard, and most of all, angry at myself for accepting this treatment for so long. Saturday morning, I did something I hadn't done in months. I called Helen and made lunch plans. "It's about time," Helen said when I picked her up in my reliable but boring sedan. "You sounded different on the phone yesterday. More present." "I feel different," I admitted as we drove to our favorite restaurant, a place I hadn't been to in over a year because Rebecca might need something. Over salads and wine, I told Helen everything. About Las Vegas, about the papers I'd found, about my growing realization that I'd been enabling my own mistreatment for decades. "Good," Helen said bluntly when I finished. "I've been waiting for you to get angry for years." "You think anger is good?" "I think anger is information. It tells you when your boundaries have been violated, when you're not being treated with respect. The question is, what are you going to do with that information?" I took a sip of wine and felt something settle into place inside my chest. "I'm going to Las Vegas." Helen raised an eyebrow. "To confront them?" "No. To show them what they're missing." I explained my plan as it formed in my mind. I would go to Las Vegas, stay at the most expensive hotel, live like the sophisticated woman I'd always been but never allowed myself to be. I would document everything, not out of spite, but as proof that I was capable of more than they'd ever imagined. Mara, Helen said slowly. That's either brilliant or completely insane. Maybe both. What if they see you? I hope they do. Helen studied my face for a long moment, then smiled. You know what? I think this is exactly what you need. You've been hiding your light under a bushel for so long. Maybe it's time to let it shine. After lunch, Helen insisted on coming shopping with me. If you're going to make a statement, you need the wardrobe to match. We spent the afternoon at department stores I'd admired but never shopped in, trying on clothes that cost more than I used to spend in 3 months. A silk blouse in deep emerald that made my silver hair look elegant instead of just old. A tailored jacket that transformed my posture and made me stand taller. A cocktail dress that was sophisticated rather than matronly. My God, Mara, Helen said as I emerged from the dressing room with a cocktail dress. You look like you should have your own reality show. Is that good? It's magnificent. You look like a woman who knows her worth. Monday morning, I called my travel agent, Doris Patterson, who'd been helping me plan my modest annual trips for 15 years. Usually, I asked for budget-friendly options, small hotels during off-season, package deals, anything that kept costs reasonable. Not today. Doris, I want to go to Las Vegas, I said without preamble. Oh, how lovely. When were you thinking? Tomorrow. I want the best hotel you can find, the most expensive suite available. Money is no object. There was a pause. Mara, are you feeling all right? I looked around my beige living room with its safe, practical furniture and neutral colors. Everything chosen to be inoffensive, unnoticed, forgettable. I'm feeling like myself for the first time in years, I said. Can you make it happen? It took Doris 3 hours and several phone calls, but she managed to book me into the penthouse suite at the Bellagio for 5 days. When she quoted the price, I didn't even flinch. I'd been saving money for imaginary emergencies for so long that I'd forgotten I was allowed to spend it on actual living. But the hotel was just the beginning. I spent Monday afternoon making calls that would have seemed impossible a week ago. First-class flights. The first time I'd ever flown anything but coach. Dinner reservations at restaurants that required months of advance notice. A private shopping appointment at the Forum Shops. Spa treatments at facilities I'd only read about in magazines. And then, because I was apparently feeling completely reckless, I did one more thing. I hired a professional photographer. Marcus Kane specialized in luxury lifestyle photography, and his portfolio was full of images that looked like they belonged in magazines. Wealthy clients at exclusive events, sophisticated travelers in exotic locations, the kind of people who lived the life I'd always admired from a distance. Mrs. Joshua, Marcus said when I called, I have to admit, this is an unusual request. A 5-day lifestyle shoot in Las Vegas? That's not typically something we do for women my age. I finished. I was going to say for anyone, actually. Most of my shoots are single events or brief sessions. You're talking about comprehensive documentation of an entire luxury experience. That's exactly what I want. I want proof that I can live this way, that I belong in this world. I want photos that show exactly who I am when I'm not hiding behind other people's expectations. And cost is truly no object. I thought about the money sitting in my conservative investment accounts, earning minimal returns while I lived like I was poor. I thought about all the years I denied myself experiences because they seemed too extravagant, too selfish, too much. Cost is no object, I confirmed. Tuesday morning, I stood in my bedroom at 5 a.m., packing clothes I'd never worn because I'd never had anywhere special enough to wear them. The black cocktail dress I'd bought for Rebecca's wedding but decided was too dramatic for a mother of the bride. The silk scarves I'd collected over the years but never worn because they seemed too fancy for my everyday life. The jewelry my mother had left me that I'd kept in a safety deposit box because I didn't want to seem like I was showing off. For 76 years, I'd been saving my best things for special occasions that never came. I'd been waiting for someone else to decide I was worth celebrating. I was done waiting. As I zipped up my new suitcase, also a recent purchase, because my old one looked like it belonged to someone who apologized for traveling, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. I looked different somehow. Not younger, exactly, but more substantial. Like a woman who took up space in the world unapologetically. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Hope you're having a restful week, Mom. The weather here is perfect. The house is even more amazing than we imagined. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. Glad you're enjoying yourselves. I'm having quite an adventure of my own. It wasn't exactly a lie. I was about to have the adventure of my lifetime. Another text, this one from Jack. Helen told me about your plan. I think you're magnificent. Give them something to really talk about. I smiled as I grabbed my suitcase and headed for the door. I wasn't just going to give them something to talk about. I was going to give them something to remember for the rest of their lives. The first-class cabin of the airplane was a revelation that made me question every economical choice I'd made in my 76 years. The seat was larger than my recliner at home. The flight attendant offered me champagne before takeoff, and the entire experience felt like stepping into a different world. Is this your first time flying first class? Asked Sarah, the elegant flight attendant who seemed genuinely interested in making my flight perfect. First time flying first class anywhere, I admitted. Well, you're going to love it. Please let me know if there's anything at all I can do to make your flight more comfortable. As the plane lifted off from Phoenix, I looked down at the city where Rebecca was probably posting photos on social media, sharing highlights from their amazing family vacation, while deliberately excluding any mention of the family member they'd left behind. In 3 hours, I'd be in the same city, living an adventure that would put their group vacation to shame. Marcus was waiting for me at the airport, exactly as we'd arranged. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 40s, with a kind of effortless style that suggested he spent a lot of time around wealthy clients. When he spotted me coming down the jet bridge in my new travel outfit, his face lit up with professional appreciation. Mrs. Joshua?
I'm Marcus Kane.
You look absolutely perfect. Please call me Mara. And thank you. Mara it is. I have to say, when my assistant briefed me on this assignment, I was intrigued. A 76-year-old woman wants a luxury lifestyle shoot in Vegas? That's a first for me, and I've photographed everyone from tech billionaires to movie stars. I hope I don't disappoint. He grinned as he took my carry-on bag. Trust me, you're not going to disappoint anyone. There's something about you, an elegance, a confidence. You're going to photograph beautifully. The ride to the Bellagio was like something out of a movie. Marcus had arranged for a Rolls-Royce, my first time in one, and as we glided through the streets of Las Vegas, he captured candid shots of me taking in the sights. The city was bigger and brighter than I'd imagined, all neon and energy and unapologetic excess. So tell me, Marcus said as he adjusted his camera settings, what's the real story here? This doesn't feel like a typical vacation shoot. I considered how much to reveal. Let's just say I'm discovering who I am when I stop limiting myself to other people's expectations. I love that. Can you tell me more? For most of my life, I've been a woman who said yes to everything, who put everyone else's needs first, who made herself small so others could feel bigger. This week, I'm finding out what happens when I take up the space I deserve. Marcus lowered his camera and looked at me with genuine interest. That's a hell of a story, and I'm honored to document it. The penthouse suite at the Bellagio exceeded every fantasy I'd ever had about luxury living. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the Strip. The living room was larger than my entire ground floor, and the bathroom featured a marble bathtub that could have accommodated a small pool party. Marcus documented my genuine amazement as I explored each stunning detail, capturing my face as I discovered amenities I'd only imagined. A fully stocked bar, fresh flowers that were replaced daily, a personal concierge who appeared within minutes of my arrival. Mrs. Joshua, the concierge said with a kind of deference I'd never experienced, "Welcome to the Bellagio. I'm James, and I'll be taking care of anything you need during your stay. Would you like me to arrange dinner reservations, show tickets, transportation?" "All of the above," I said, and my voice carried a confidence that surprised me. "Excellent. I have some recommendations that I think you'll find perfect." As James left to make arrangements, I stood on my private balcony looking out at the city sprawling below me. Somewhere out there, Rebecca and David's family were probably settling into their vacation rental, excited about their week of family bonding. They had no idea that the woman they dismissed as too inconvenient to include was living better than any of them had ever lived. "You look like you belong here," Marcus said, capturing me silhouetted against the city lights. "I'm starting to think I do." That afternoon, we embarked on what Marcus called a lifestyle montage. Our first stop was the Forum Shops, where a personal stylist named Victoria helped me select an entirely new wardrobe that reflected the sophisticated woman I was becoming. "You have excellent bone structure," Victoria said as she held up a flowing silk dress in deep burgundy. "And your silver hair is absolutely stunning. We're going to emphasize your natural elegance." I tried on outfit after outfit, each one more beautiful than the last. Cashmere that felt like luxury against my skin, silk that moved like water, colors that made my complexion glow. For the first time in my adult life, I was dressing to be noticed rather than to blend in. "That's it," Marcus said when I emerged from the dressing room in a stunning black evening gown. "That's your signature look right there." I turned to examine myself in the three-way mirror and gasped. The woman looking back at me was elegant, confident, radiant. She looked like someone important, someone worth celebrating, someone who commanded attention and respect. She looked like someone Rebecca would be proud to call her mother, if Rebecca had bothered to get to know her. "We'll take everything," I told Victoria, and her smile could have powered the entire strip. From shopping, we went to the spa at the Bellagio, where I was treated like visiting royalty. The masseuse, a serene woman named Linda, worked out tension I didn't even realize I'd been carrying. "You hold a lot of stress in your shoulders," she observed as she worked. "Have you been carrying heavy burdens for a long time?" 76 years worth, I murmured into the massage table. "Well, we're going to help you let all of that go today." And somehow, miraculously, she did. By the time I emerged from the spa 3 hours later, I felt like a completely different person. My hair had been styled by a master artist, my makeup applied by someone who specialized in mature beauty, and my nails painted in what the technician called confidence red. "You look like a movie star," Marcus said as he captured me sipping champagne in the spa's relaxation lounge. "I feel like one." That evening, I dined alone at Joel Robuchon, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. 6 months ago, the idea of eating alone at a fancy restaurant would have mortified me. Tonight, there was nothing sad or pathetic about the experience. I was a sophisticated woman enjoying excellent food and service, and every staff member treated me with a kind of deference usually reserved for celebrities. Marcus documented it all. Me studying the wine menu with the sommelier, laughing with my charming waiter, savoring each course of the tasting menu like I was born to this lifestyle. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said as we waited for dessert. "Of course." "This transformation, it's not just about the clothes and the hotel, is it? There's something deeper happening here." I considered his question while taking a sip of the extraordinary wine the sommelier had selected. "I'm 76 years old, and I've never lived like this. I've never been treated like this. I've spent my entire life putting everyone else first, making myself smaller so they could feel bigger. And for what? So they could exclude me from their family vacation and lie to my face about it. Someone excluded you from a family vacation? My daughter. She told me there wasn't room for me on their Las Vegas trip because the rental house could only accommodate 15 people. I gestured around the opulent restaurant. The house can accommodate 25 people. Marcus let out a low whistle. That's brutal. It was a wake-up call. I realized I've been living like I don't deserve nice things, like I'm not worth including, like my role in life is to serve other people's convenience. But you know what? I do deserve nice things. I am worth including, and I'm done apologizing for existing. Good for you. And I have to say, you're handling this with incredible grace. A lot of people would have gone straight to confrontation. Confrontation is what they'd expect from the old me. Dramatic, emotional, easy to dismiss. This version of me is much more powerful. After dinner, we strolled through the Bellagio's famous conservatory, where Marcus captured me among the gorgeous floral displays like some kind of sophisticated fairy godmother. Then we went to the fountains, where I watched the water dance to music with the kind of wonder I hadn't felt in decades. These are some of the best photos I've ever taken, Marcus told me as we headed back to the hotel. You're absolutely radiant. Back in my suite, I finally allowed myself to check my phone. There were several messages from Rebecca, all variations of having such a great time, and wish you were here, along with photos of her and Sophie at various Las Vegas attractions. Looking at the photos, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Part of me was still hurt by the exclusion, still angry about the lies. But another part of me felt almost grateful. If Rebecca hadn't excluded me, I never would have discovered this version of myself. I texted back, "Looks wonderful. I'm having quite an adventure myself. Enjoy every moment." It was the truth, if not the whole truth. Another text came in, this one from Helen. "How's life as a woman of mystery?" I typed back, "Magnificent. I'm becoming the person I was always meant to be." Good. Don't let anyone convince you to go back to hiding. I spent the evening going through my new clothes, planning outfits for the rest of my stay. For the first time in my adult life, I was dressing to be seen rather than to disappear. I was choosing colors and styles that made me feel powerful rather than invisible. As I prepared for bed in silk pajamas that cost more than my usual monthly clothing budget, I caught sight of myself in the full-length mirror. The woman looking back at me was elegant, confident, and completely at ease in this luxury environment. She looked like she belonged here. More importantly, she looked like she belonged anywhere she chose to be. My second day in Las Vegas dawned bright with possibility. I woke up in the most comfortable bed I'd ever experienced, ordered room service that would have fed my entire book club, and spent an hour on my private balcony planning my day like the sophisticated woman I was becoming. Marcus arrived at 10 a.m. with his usual enthusiasm and a gleam in his eye that suggested he'd been thinking about our conversation the night before. "I've been researching your daughter's family," he said as he set up his equipment. "They're all over social media, posting from every tourist spot in Vegas. The Bellagio Conservatory, the Forum Shops, various restaurants." I felt a flutter of something that might have been anxiety. "Are you suggesting we follow them?" "I'm suggesting you go to the places you want to go. If your family happens to be at those same places, well, that's just an interesting coincidence, isn't it?" It was a dangerous idea, but also incredibly tempting. What if they see me? What if they do? You're not doing anything wrong. You're a sophisticated woman living her best life in Las Vegas. If they happen to witness that. He shrugged eloquently. I thought about Rebecca's social media posts, all the photos of her family having fun in the same city, where she told me I wasn't welcome. Maybe it was time she saw exactly what she'd excluded from her family celebration. "Where would you suggest we start?" Marcus grinned. "The Forum Shops. According to Instagram, they were there yesterday afternoon. Prime time for a sophisticated shopping expedition, don't you think?" I was wearing one of my new outfits, a stunning cream-colored suit with gold accessories that made me look like old Hollywood royalty. My hair was styled perfectly, my makeup flawless, and I carried myself with the kind of confidence that money can't buy but comfort with yourself can develop. The Forum shops were as opulent as I'd expected, but this time I wasn't intimidated by the luxury. I belonged here as much as anyone else, and I moved through the space like I owned it. Marcus captured me browsing at high-end boutiques, examining jewelry that cost more than most people's cars, selecting gifts with the casual air of someone accustomed to luxury shopping. We were near the central fountain when I heard a familiar voice behind me. Oh my God, that woman looks just like. I turned slowly, and there was Emma, David's sister, staring at me with her mouth hanging open. Behind her stood David's brother Tom and his wife Jennifer, all three of them looking like they'd seen a ghost. Mara? Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "Hello, Emma," I said calmly, smoothing down my designer jacket. "How lovely to see you." Marcus, bless him, kept photographing as if nothing unusual was happening. Click, click, click went his camera, capturing my serene expression and their stunned faces. "But what are you? How are you?" Emma stammered. "I'm in Las Vegas," I said with a gracious smile. "Same as you, it appears." "Marcus, could you get a few shots of me by the fountain? The lighting there is exquisite." "Absolutely," Marcus said smoothly. "The contrast between the water and your outfit is perfect." I glided past the shocked trio as if they were part of the scenery, my head held high, my confidence radiating like expensive perfume. Behind me, I could hear frantic whispering, but I didn't turn around. "That was masterful," Marcus murmured as he repositioned me near the fountain. "You handled that like a professional." "I've had 76 years to develop dignity," I said softly. We spent another hour at the Forum shops, with Marcus capturing increasingly elaborate shots. I felt like a movie star, posing among the luxury displays in my designer clothes, the professional lighting making me glow with an inner radiance I'd forgotten I possessed. My phone started buzzing around noon. First, a text from David. "Hey Mara, Emma thought she saw you at the Forum shops? That's crazy, right? Hope you're having a relaxing week at home." I showed the message to Marcus, who grinned like Christmas morning. "What are you going to do?" "Nothing," I said. Yet. More texts followed. "Rebecca, Mom, the weirdest thing happened. David's family swears they saw you shopping in Vegas. I told them that was impossible since you're house sitting for us. Everything okay at home?" I tucked the phone away without responding. Let them wonder. Let them question what they thought they knew about reliable, predictable Mara. We continued with our planned itinerary, completely ignoring the family crisis my appearance was apparently causing. Lunch at a rooftop restaurant with panoramic views of the Strip, where Marcus captured me looking elegant and worldly as I sipped champagne and enjoyed cuisine that cost more per bite than I used to spend on entire meals. "You know," Marcus said as he reviewed the photos on his camera, "you're not just modeling for these shots. You're actually living this lifestyle. There's a difference, and it shows in every image." "What's the difference?" "Most people I photograph are performing wealth and sophistication. You're simply being wealthy and sophisticated. It's completely natural to you." The afternoon brought a spa appointment at the Ritz-Carlton, where I was pampered like visiting royalty. Facial treatments that promised to reverse time, massages that melted away decades of tension, hairstyling that made me look like I belonged on magazine covers. My phone continued buzzing throughout the treatments, more confused texts from David's family, increasingly frantic messages from Rebecca. I ignored them all. The new Mara wasn't available to manage other people's confusion at her inconvenient existence. That evening, I had dinner reservations at Le Cirque, another restaurant that required months of advance booking and charged prices that would make most people faint. I wore my black evening gown with my mother's diamond jewelry, and when I walked into the restaurant, conversation actually stopped. Mrs. Joshua, the maitre d' said with the kind of deference usually reserved for celebrities, "Your table is ready." I was seated at the best table in the house, with perfect views of the strip and the kind of service that made me feel like the most important person in the room. Marcus documented every moment. My confidence as I ordered wine that cost more than most people's monthly rent. My elegant posture as I savored each course. My genuine joy at being treated with such respect and attention. "I have to ask," Marcus said over dessert, "where has this woman been hiding all these years?" "In Phoenix," I said simply, making casseroles and babysitting and pretending that was enough. And now, I looked around the restaurant, at the crystal chandeliers and the impeccable service and the other diners who clearly belonged in this rarefied world. 6 months ago, I would have felt intimidated, out of place, like an imposter who didn't deserve to be here. Tonight, I felt like I'd finally come home. "Now I'm just getting started," I said. Around 9 o'clock, as we were finishing our wine, I spotted a familiar figure being seated across the restaurant. David's mother, Martha, along with her husband, Robert, and their son, Mark, with his wife, were being shown to a prominent table. Well, Marcus murmured, following my gaze. "The plot thickens." Martha noticed me almost immediately. I watched her do a double take, then lean across the table to whisper urgently to her husband. Within moments, all 4 of them were staring in my direction with expressions ranging from confusion to grudging admiration. I smiled serenely and raised my wine glass in their direction, as if toasting old friends at a chance encounter. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" Marcus asked, capturing my victorious expression. "Immensely," I admitted. For years, Martha has made little comments about my simple lifestyle and my modest circumstances. I wonder what she's thinking now. 10 minutes later, Mark approached our table, his expression a mixture of bewilderment and respect. "Mara, wow, you look incredible." "Thank you, Mark. How are you enjoying your family vacation?" "It's great, thanks. Listen, I wanted to apologize for earlier at the Forum Shops. We were just surprised to see you, and—" "No need to apologize," I said graciously. "I understand completely. You weren't expecting to see me because I wasn't invited to your family vacation." Mark shifted uncomfortably. "About that, I think there might have been some miscommunication. Just different priorities. Please give my regards to your family." It was a polite dismissal, and Mark recognized it as such. He nodded awkwardly and returned to his table, where I could see him having an animated conversation with the others. "That was beautifully handled," Marcus said. "You're developing quite a talent for this." "I'm discovering that I've always had the talent. I just never had the confidence to use it." After dinner, we took a moonlit stroll through the Bellagio's gardens, where Marcus captured me looking like a sophisticated fairy godmother among the illuminated flowers. The evening was perfect, warm but not hot, clear skies full of stars, the kind of night that made you feel like anything was possible. Back in my suite, I finally allowed myself to read the messages that had been accumulating all day. Rebecca had called 4 times and sent a dozen increasingly frantic texts. "Mom, seriously, are you in Vegas? David's family is really insisting they saw you. This is so weird. Can you please call me? I'm starting to worry. Emma, please respond. Everyone is talking about this woman who looks exactly like you, but is obviously wealthy and glamorous, and that can't be you because you're house sitting, right?" I poured myself a glass of champagne and composed my response carefully. "Hello, dear. Sorry for the delayed response. I've been quite busy today. Yes, I'm in Las Vegas. Having a wonderful time. Hope you're enjoying your family vacation. Love you."
Send.
I turned off my phone and stood on my balcony, looking out at the city that had already transformed me in ways I couldn't have imagined. Tomorrow would bring new adventures, new discoveries about who I could be when I stopped limiting myself to other people's expectations. But tonight, I was simply Mara Joshua, a sophisticated woman of means enjoying a beautiful evening in a beautiful city, finally living the life she deserved. And it felt magnificent. My phone started ringing at 6 a.m. Las Vegas time, which meant Rebecca was calling at 7 a.m. Phoenix time, early for her, which told me exactly how rattled she was by my revelation. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again, and again. On the fourth call, I finally answered. "Good morning, Rebecca." Mom. Her voice was tight, with barely controlled panic. What the hell is going on? I'd never heard my daughter use that tone with me before, but instead of making me apologetic, it made me strangely calm. "Language, dear." "Language? Language?" "Mom, you completely blindsided me last night. You're in Las Vegas? How is that even possible? Why didn't you tell me?" I sipped my room service coffee and watched the sunrise paint the strip in shades of gold. "Because you told me there wasn't room for me on your family vacation, remember? So I decided to have my own vacation. But why Las Vegas? Of all places. Why not Las Vegas? It's a beautiful city with excellent hotels and restaurants. Perfect for the kind of sophisticated vacation I wanted to take." Sophisticated vacation? Rebecca's voice cracked slightly. "Mom, who are you right now?" "I'm the same person I've always been, honey. I'm just not hiding anymore." There was a long pause. "We need to talk. Face to face. Can you come to our villa?"
No. No.
"No, I cannot come to your villa. You made it very clear that I wasn't welcome there. If you want to see me, you can come to my hotel." "What hotel are you staying at?" "The Bellagio."
Pas tout de suite.
Another silence, longer this time. "The penthouse suite?" "Mom, how can you possibly afford?" "I can afford quite a lot of things, Rebecca. I just never chose to spend money on myself before." "This is insane. You're acting like a completely different person." "Maybe I am," I said. "Maybe this is who I was always supposed to be, and I just forgot for a while." Marcus arrived shortly after I hung up, bringing his usual energy and a new perspective on my situation. "How are you feeling about seeing your daughter today?" he asked as he set up his equipment. "Nervous. Excited. Determined." I considered the question more carefully. "Ready, I think." "What's your goal for the meeting?" "To show her who I really am. To let her see the woman she chose to exclude from her family celebration, and to find out if she's capable of treating that woman with respect." We spent the morning at the spa again, where I was pampered like visiting royalty. Facial treatments, massage therapy, hairstyling that made me look like I belonged on magazine covers. Marcus documented the entire transformation, capturing my evolution from ordinary grandmother to sophisticated woman of leisure. "You realize," he said as we reviewed the morning's photos, "you're not just playing a role anymore. This is actually who you are." He was right. The woman in the photographs wasn't pretending to be elegant and confident. She simply was elegant and confident. The luxury surroundings didn't intimidate her. They complimented her. She belonged in this world because she'd finally given herself permission to belong anywhere. Around noon, Rebecca called to say she was in the Bellagio lobby. I chose my outfit carefully for our meeting. A silk blouse in deep purple that made my silver hair look like expensive platinum, paired with elegant black slacks and the pearl necklace that had been my mother's. Professional but not intimidating, sophisticated but still approachable. I wanted Rebecca to see exactly what she'd excluded from her family vacation. The lobby of the Bellagio was crowded with tourists, but I spotted Rebecca immediately. She was standing near the registration desk, looking around with an expression I'd never seen before, something between awe and bewilderment. Next to her stood David, who appeared deeply uncomfortable, and Sophie, who was clutching a stuffed animal and looking confused by the obvious tension. When Rebecca saw me approaching, her face went through a series of expressions: surprise, confusion, and something that looked almost like fear. "Mom," she said uncertainly, you're... Hello, Rebecca. David. Sophie, sweetheart. I bent down to hug my granddaughter, who immediately launched into excited chatter about their vacation activities. "Grandmama, this place is like a fairy tale. Are you really staying here?" "I am indeed, sweetheart. Can we see your room? Please." I looked at Rebecca, who was still staring at me like I was a stranger. "Would you like to see my suite?" Rebecca nodded mutely, and we made our way to the elevators. The ride to the penthouse level was silent, except for Sophie's excited commentary about the hotel's opulence. When I opened the door to my suite, Sophie gasped audibly. "Grandma, it's like a palace." It really was. The living room was larger than Rebecca's entire first apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the Strip. Fresh flowers, replaced daily, filled crystal vases, and the afternoon sun streamed through the windows, making everything glow like a movie set. "My God," David breathed, looking around with obvious amazement. "Mara, this must cost more than you spend on rent." I finished calmly. "Yes, it does." Rebecca was moving through the space like someone in a dream, touching surfaces and examining details with the kind of attention she usually reserved for checking Sophie's homework. "Mom," she said finally, turning to face me, "I don't understand any of this. Where did this come from? The clothes, the hotel, the confidence." "It came from finally deciding I deserved it. But you never, you've never done anything like this before." "No, I haven't. I've been saving my money and my dreams for other people for 76 years. Last week, I decided it was time to spend them on myself." Sophie had discovered the balcony and was pressed against the glass, marveling at the view. David was examining the furnishings with the eye of someone calculating costs, but Rebecca was focused entirely on me, studying my face like she was trying to solve a puzzle. "Mom, about the Las Vegas trip, about not inviting you. You mean about lying to me?" I corrected gently. She flinched. "We didn't lie. We thought you'd be more comfortable staying home." "Rebecca, I found the rental agreement in David's office. The villa accommodates 25 people, not 15. David's face went pale. "Mara, I can explain." "No need to explain, David. I understand the situation perfectly. You didn't want me on your family vacation, so you created a story about limited space. It's quite simple." We didn't." Rebecca struggled for words. "Mom, you have to understand, David's family can be overwhelming. We thought you might not enjoy." "Did you ask me what I might enjoy?" "No." "Did it occur to you that I might want to be included in my daughter's family celebration, regardless of whether David's relatives are overwhelming?" "No, I guess it didn't." Sophie came running back from the balcony, her face flushed with excitement. "Grandma, can we order room service? I saw the menu, and they have chocolate cake." "Of course, sweetheart. Whatever you'd like." As I called room service, ordering an elaborate afternoon tea that was said twice, as many people, I watched Rebecca's expression carefully. She was beginning to understand that this wasn't a temporary transformation or a rebellious phase. This was who I actually was when I stopped limiting myself to her narrow expectations. "Mom," she said quietly while Sophie explored the bathroom, "I need to ask you something." "Yes. Are you angry with me?" I considered the question while arranging myself gracefully on the silk sofa. I was angry, yes, but now I'm more disappointed. Disappointed? "Rebecca, I've been your mother for 34 years. I've supported you through everything. Your father's abandonment, financial struggles when you were growing up, your wedding, Sophie's birth, career challenges. I've been present for every important moment of your life. She nodded, tears starting to form in her eyes. But when it came time for you to make family memories in Las Vegas, I wasn't even considered. I wasn't worth a conversation about whether I might like to be included. I was just dismissed.
Mom, I'm sorry. I really am.
We made a mistake. Yes, you did. But the mistake wasn't about logistics or room limitations. The mistake was about how you see me. You see me as a convenience, not as a person with her own life and desires. Room service arrived with a spread that made Sophie's eyes widen with delight. As we sat around the elegant table, sharing exquisite pastries and perfect tea, I watched my family take in their surroundings with new awareness. Grandma, Sophie said around a bite of chocolate eclair, are you rich? Rebecca and David both froze, clearly wondering the same thing. I'm confident, sweetheart. I've been saving money for a long time, and I finally decided to spend some of it on myself. How much money? David asked, then immediately looked embarrassed. I'm sorry, that's none of my business. You're right, it's not. But since you're family, I'll tell you that your grandmother is financially independent and has been for quite some time. The implications of this statement hung in the air. Rebecca was clearly doing mental calculations, realizing that her assumptions about my limitations had been completely wrong. Mom, she said slowly, when you said you wanted to save the inheritance for emergencies, I meant emergencies that never came. What I didn't realize until recently is that living a half-life isn't virtuous. It's wasteful. We finished our tea in relative silence, with Sophie providing the only conversation as she marveled over the hotel's amenities. When they prepared to leave, Rebecca lingered at the door. Mom, can we talk more tomorrow? Just the two of us. If you'd like. I would. I think I owe you more than just an apology. After they left, I stood on my balcony for a long time, watching the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the strip. The confrontation had gone better than I'd expected. Rebecca was beginning to understand what she'd done wrong, which was more progress than I dared hope for. But understanding and changing were two very different things. The real test would come when we returned to Phoenix, when the novelty of this transformation wore off, when the patterns of decades reasserted themselves. Marcus joined me for dinner that evening at another spectacular restaurant, where we celebrated the day's success with champagne and cuisine that was art on a plate. How do you think it went? He asked. Better than expected. Rebecca is starting to see me as a person rather than just a convenient mother. Whether she can sustain that perspective remains to be seen. And if she can't, I thought about the woman I'd become over the past few days, confident, sophisticated, unafraid to take up space in the world. That woman didn't need anyone's approval to exist. Then I'll be disappointed, but I'll still be magnificent, I said. Marcus raised his glass. To being magnificent, regardless of other people's capacity to recognize it. To being magnificent, I agreed. The next morning brought another early call from Rebecca, but this time her voice carried a different quality, less panic, more uncertainty. Mom, could we have lunch today? Just the two of us? I have some things I want to say, and I'd like to say them properly. I was sitting on my balcony in a silk robe that cost more than my usual monthly clothing budget, watching the city wake up below me while sipping coffee that was probably grown on some exclusive mountain in Jamaica. All right, I said. Where did you have in mind? Could we meet at your hotel? There's supposed to be an amazing restaurant there, and honestly, I'd like to experience a little bit of how you've been living this week. It was a small acknowledgement, but I recognized it as significant. Rebecca was asking to enter my world instead of expecting me to accommodate hers. I'll make a reservation for 1 o'clock. After I hung up, Marcus arrived with his usual enthusiasm and a new perspective on my situation. Final day of shooting, he said as he set up his equipment. How does it feel to be finishing your transformation? Like I'm just getting started, I said, which surprised me because I realized it was true. We spent the morning capturing what Marcus called victory shots, images of me looking confident and radiant in various locations around the hotel. Me in the conservatory, elegant among the seasonal flowers. Me by the fountains, sophisticated against the backdrop of dancing water. Me in the luxury shops, selecting gifts with the casual air of someone accustomed to the finer things. These photos are going to be incredible keepsakes, Marcus said as we reviewed the shots on his camera. But more than that, they're proof of what you're capable of when you stop limiting yourself. They're proof that I was always this person. I just forgot for a while. Rebecca arrived 10 minutes early for our lunch, which told me she was still nervous. She'd made an obvious effort with her appearance, wearing a dress I'd never seen before and makeup that suggested she'd spent considerable time on her preparation. "Mom, you look wonderful," she said as we were seated at a table overlooking the fountains. "Thank you. So do you. That's a lovely dress." "I bought it this morning," she admitted. "I wanted to look nice for our lunch." It was such a small thing, but it meant everything. Rebecca had never bothered to dress up for me before. She'd never considered that I might be worth making an effort for. We ordered lunch. I chose exactly what I wanted without checking prices. Rebecca selected something modest, but didn't comment on the expense of my choices. Progress, albeit small. "Mom, I've been doing a lot of thinking since yesterday," she began once our salads had arrived. "About our relationship, about how I've been treating you, about what kind of daughter I've been. And what conclusions have you reached? That I've been a terrible daughter," she said bluntly. "Not just recently, but for years, maybe decades." I raised an eyebrow. That's a strong word. It's an accurate word. "Mom, when's the last time I took you out to lunch? When's the last time I called just to see how you were doing? When's the last time I asked about your dreams or your goals or what you wanted out of life? I asked you those same questions 2 days ago, and I couldn't answer them because I've never cared enough to ask. I've been so focused on my own life, my own problems, my own family, that I forgot you were a person with needs and desires outside of being my mother." Our entrees arrived, and we ate in thoughtful silence for a few minutes. I could see Rebecca gathering courage for whatever she wanted to say next. "The thing is," she continued finally, "I think I learned this behavior from you." "Excuse me? You taught me that your needs didn't matter. You taught me that you existed solely to serve our family. Every time you canceled your own plans to babysit, every time you said yes when you probably wanted to say no, every time you put us first without even considering yourself, you taught me that this was normal." I felt a flash of defensiveness, but I forced myself to consider her words. "Are you saying this is my fault? I'm saying we both created this dynamic. You taught me that you didn't have needs, and I chose to believe it because it was convenient. But I'm an adult now, Mom. I should have seen what was happening and done something about it. And what do you want to do about it now?" Rebecca reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope, which she slid across the table to me. "I've been working on this all morning." I opened the envelope to find what appeared to be a handwritten contract. At the top, in Rebecca's neat script, it said, "New rules for our relationship." I read through the list, and with each item, I felt something tight in my chest begin to loosen. "I will call Mom at least once a week just to talk, not because I need something. I will ask about Mom's life, her interests, her dreams, and her goals. I will include Mom in family plans and ask for her input, not just inform her of decisions we've already made. I will respect Mom's right to say no without guilt tripping or manipulation. I will acknowledge that Mom is a person with her own life, not just an extension of our family. I will show appreciation for Mom's help and support, not take it for granted. I will make an effort to contribute to Mom's happiness, not just expect her to contribute